Recording.
Yep.
All right, it's October 4th, 2022, 7:30 PM. I'm going to call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Members present, myself, John Tehan, Bob Shabbat, Andy Marco, Doug Roberts, Becca Sanofsky, and Joseph Paul. No applications for receipt tonight. Item D, public hearing, PZ-22-11. Special permit application for expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery at 163 Ruby Road, applicant owner David Litwin. This is continued from the meeting on 9/13. All right, one of the things we talked about, you're gonna go down to the site. What were the findings?
So last week, I believe it was, we went and met with the applicant on the property to basically just go out and verify the conditions, I guess, as shown in the photos. And I don't want to put too many words in his mouth. I think he is sort of prepared to clarify further, but one of the criteria of the home occupation is in regards to external evidence of the business. And obviously, with the manner in which the site is now, there is evidence of the business. You can see the vehicles based upon where they're parked. So we did have a discussion with the applicant about how the screening could be basically improved upon and what they could install beyond some of the plantings, given the location and along the roadway, so that there would be permanent screening rather than just some vegetation that doesn't really do much even in the summer. So I think, you know, if he presents and there are some additional questions or concerns about how we can go about that, we can kind of go from there. But am I missing anything or?
No, that was the main thing. Probably let David expand on that and we'll go to the public again.
I can clarify from there.
Yep, go ahead, David.
Right, we'll keep it full, place in the corner and.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks. All right. I'm hoping everybody can hear me on the home front. I know there were some questions last time of being able to hear me. What I have for the first thing I'd like to go through is basically, it seems to be a lot of focus on the septic business that's existing. I took an opportunity to print out Todd Bissonnette's submission recently. I believe that was done on the 20th. And I'd like to go through the items he had on here, plus clarification. My clarification will be on the right side, highlighted in yellow. Policy, first page. That is a printout by Todd on the services I provide in the areas I cover. Obviously, I'm not providing services on my own property. These are areas and basically consistent with every other company that does this in business. Now, there's a comment by Todd here that says, does not appear to be consistent with section 3 definition of occupation. And we'll flip 2 pages for you. To section 3 definitions. Home occupations. Okay, let's start with what's excluded. Home occupation shall not include restaurants, tea rooms, or other eating or drinking places. Dog kennels, animal hospitals, barbershops, beauty parlors, automotive service, supply, sales, or repair. Now, none of them say septic or propane. So it's immediately past the point of being directly excluded. Going farther down in yellow, home occupations include, but are not limited to, preparation, sales of those products customarily produced in the home or garden and actually produced in the subject home or garden, such as baking, home preserves, the preparation and sales of products of art, crafts, actually prepared by the subject premises, such as sewing, painting, wood carvings, cabinet making, ceramics, writing, sculpture, ornamental glass and metalworking, the workshops of skilled craftsmen such as watchmakers, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, house painters, paper hangers, radio and television repair, and the offices of architects, accountants, engineers, psychotherapists, real estate, and insurance agents and other recognized professionals. So going to the first line, home occupations include and are not limited to, would clearly support my application. I'm not in the prohibited section. I would fall under, but are not limited to. Now, in the packet that was presented by Todd, the next page, I'm not really sure what this is all about, why I have a property card from the assessors. I mean, I pay taxes on property. That's how they figure out how much I pay. So this one here is kind of, I think, beyond the point of an application for adding propane to what I do. Now, this next page, it's going to be a long drawn out one because we got to reference several other pages. Okay. Please find enclosed current drawings taken 9/15 of David Lippman's driveway, which are not consistent with the site plan dated 6/24/22, which was submitted by David Lippman to the P&Z within application of special home permit occupation. Please reference the site plan that David submitted and compare it to the photos which are actual and current to demonstrate that approximately 12 feet of driveway and apron does not exist, nor is the pole CLMP 1089 in the correct position. Okay, if you flip to the next page, or the next page right after, it's a better photo. There's an apron in my driveway. So the apron does exist. The pole is to the north of my building and to the north of the driveway. There is some washout from dirt and otherwise on the apron. Going back 2 pages prior, I would like to mention that upon the site plan, it states iron pin boundary is 15.2 feet from the pavement, which substantially reduces the size of the driveway, the apron to the road, the side yard of the garage, when accurately drawn. Most importantly, it appears that most of the equipment for the home occupation located at 163 Ruby, which is required, appears to be located on 187 Ruby, which is non-compliance of the zoning regulation. Okay, now, going over to the right side, Todd is mistaken on his review of the site plan of the boundary of 163 and 187 Ruby, both of which properties I own. The iron pin he is referencing in his 3rd paragraph is the marking for the westernmost boundary of the state of Connecticut road easement, not the boundary pin between 163 and 187 Ruby. There are several of these iron pins starting at Hancock Road and extending south of my property. There are probably others on other properties on Ruby, but they are not of concern to me or this application for propane. The boundary pin for 163 Ruby on the northern border and 187 Ruby on the southern border is, on the end of my drawing, 131 feet to the north of the CLMP pole, not 12 feet, which is to the north end of my drawing. If you refer to the very last page of your packet, you'll see highlighted on the right side, that's where the boundary pin actually is. And I included a photo. This pin was set by Dave Garrett many years ago. It has a surveyor license number on it. Now, just on a elaboration point, the pins that Todd was measuring to, which marked the westernmost boundary of the state property, were placed there a long time ago when Ralph and I had hair. Hancock Road. I'm not talking about sure.
Yeah, we got some people looking at you.
This was probably more than 20 so years ago when they were going to look at removing the hill on Ruby Road between Ruby and Hancock. The state put in the boundaries. The town, I was going to give them some land to go get rid of the hill because everybody hates it. It's a real problem. Originally, the buses were supposed to be making a turn down to the town garage to fuel up and service and otherwise, and left turn in the blind hill was a problem. Eventually, it didn't come to pass, but the pins are still there. So that's why that was referenced originally on the drawing as a point to go from the road back to where my trucks are parked. Okay, continuing farther down the page, Todd brought up an interesting point about my usage or parking of my equipment on my abutting properties. Essentially, should I amend my application to include every parcel I own to use or store or cross over with my equipment to comply with the commission's decision? Obviously, there's some discussion needed on that. Next one down was referencing Todd's concern for wanting a certified survey. Section 11.01.03.02 states clearly, an accurately drawn plot plan to scale or sketch with pertinent dimensions, existing or proposed, and any other pertinent features will allow my application to be acceptable. You can actually scale off the drawing based on the 24-foot wide dimension of the garage. It's not an A2 survey. I do not hold myself out to be a licensed surveyor. But in this case, it does not appear to be required by the regulations. Now, another issue of Todd's concern is his assumption that every vehicle, piece of equipment, which are essentially tools of the trade for septic and many other things, trailer, would be located directly adjacent to my garage. That's an incorrect assumption. That drawing submitted is correct in reflecting the number of vehicles normally parked at 163 Ruby Road. The current drawing shows 2 tanker trucks and 1 box truck and are what is planned. That may include any combination of 2 vacuum trucks for summer conditions, 2 propane trucks for winter conditions, or a propane and a vacuum truck fall or spring as it transitions seasons. A piece of equipment that is transitory, either entering or leaving or receiving short-term servicing, though I'd like to be able to change my oil occasionally, is probably of minor concern considering the duration versus the routine daily or overnight parking of vehicles. In producing the drawing, I chose to include dimensions related to the safety of parking vehicles from Ruby Road for this application and prior precedent from my experience with Sue Jorgensen, retired zoning agent, that no vehicle decals or advertising should be legible from the road. Separating distance for vehicles to existing structures are to comply with the fire marshal, who will reference both zoning regulations and in turn defer to the state of Connecticut, which defers to NFPA, DOT, and OSHA. I am not putting up nor adding to any existing structure. If any additional structure are to be added, the appropriate documentation will be submitted at that time. There is something in Todd's bottom notation that he would like a copy of any drawings submitted. I believe those are posted online, and you can, I don't know what they charge to hand them out. Probably free for you folks. And I'll discharge this one. Okay, we've gone and looked at the next photo regarding the telephone pole and the driveway. And then the one that's highlighted showing the offset of pole 1089, clearly not in front of my garage. Included in the packet that Todd submitted, I'm not exactly sure how it's relevant. My Secretary of State annual report filing for Satisfaction Realty. I am a licensed broker. I have no clients. I have no website. I am a personal investor that purchases investment grade real estate. So I have nothing there other than my cell phone and an email that I get onto or MLS. There are no agents, no customers, nobody coming into the property. Okay, again, it continues with the annual report for that particular company. Next, we go a little farther down, several more pages, at Satisfaction Realty. Admiral Propane Services, that is 4 pages down. You'll see that on the left. Let's let you all catch up with it. This is Secretary of State filings for Admiral Propane. On that first page, essentially to be able to comply with applying for a home occupation or anything else with zoning, I'm required to have every business license or other document prepared to move forward with business because the commission does not want to obviously have somebody kicking the tires. It's not serious about moving forward. This was one of the original filings. Now there is a note on here. You see 163 Ruby Road. So that showing the correct location, and subsequent pages will follow on same thing, Secretary of State filing. Let's go forward again to Litman Construction LLC. That was formed many years ago, actually before we even discussed selling or providing property to the town for knocking the hill out next to Hancock. So I think Clinton might be president then. It was originally filed with the state of Connecticut under recommendation of council with the home improvement contractor's license in preparation for 15 Hancock, which I still own. I built from the ground up. It remains a legal entity with home improvement construction license due to some towns in Connecticut still requiring the home improvement construction license in addition to trade licenses. There is no website, no advertising, nor staff associated with this legal entity. It simply exists and I maintain the HIC license. It's slowly fading out for towns requiring that, but it's not completely gone. Okay, next page is still related to Litman Construction. And, basically, I thank Todd for reminding me I needed to update with Secretary of State because what it shows is my original 190 Ruby Road address, which was across from my barn. It burned to the ground on December 29th, 2003, which some of you may still remember. And leaving myself, my pregnant wife, and 6-year-old son without a house. But I had an opportunity down the road to update the address to 163 Ruby Road. Okay, we're gonna have to flip a few more pages past the Secretary of State stuff, and let's get to the first drawing that shows my site. And there's some comments about other concerns. Now, I spoke previously, one of the issues Todd's concern was that every piece of equipment I own or will own in the future may be directly located adjacent to the driveway. The drawing submitted is correct in reflecting the number of vehicles normally parked at 163 Ruby Road. And I have no intentions of making it any more complex for myself. If we look at the drawing, Todd did mark the pond farther down the street. I'm more than 180 feet from wetlands. And propane is a gas. It doesn't affect water. It evaporates. So I don't think there's a wetlands concern here. Okay, next, if you go clockwise across the top, current and proposed area for septic and propane trucks. That is correct. That would be where they would be located, although I wouldn't necessarily say have them in that order on any day of the week. I might want to have the box truck closer to the garage or something else in a different order. that shouldn't really affect this application. Buried propane tank. I have a buried 1,000-gallon propane tank that supplies propane to my heating system. There is an underground line. Originally, the whole insulation was approved by Willington Inspection many years ago. Let's see, going a little farther, if you look going across Monica and the box truck, there's a blue line which Todd originally estimated based on the state of Connecticut sideline setback pin. That would have been Route 187 Ruby. But again, flipping to the last page, if you compare the two pages, there is a significant difference. The concern of being too close to the adjacent property line, I think probably would quell some concerns. I also spoke with our zoning agents, and I did indicate I'm more than acceptable for a condition to indicate that any permit issued would be such that it's conditional to all of my properties remaining in my ownership. And obviously, if I chose at any point in time to sell something, that would bring it back to review for the commission. I have no intention of selling. I typically only buy. Continuing on, current evergreen screening extending from 163 Ruby Road to 187. Todd indicated there's none, but if you look at the following pages, there are evergreens shown from my side looking toward Ruby. If the state stopped using that green crap they pour on the roads, my trees would be doing a lot better. I mean, it kills off. I've tried half a dozen different varieties. Every year we replant the dead ones. If you'd like, I can provide receipts to the commission of trees we purchased and stuff like that. But it's just frustrating. Actually, one of the best trees I've had any success with was Doug fir, but I'm hesitant to put more in because that is an alternate host for the Cooley gall, which is found on blue spruce. And I do not want to cause problems environmentally. So if you flip through the photos, you can see young to moderate trees. There are gaps in it. There's no question about it. Something doesn't take, it dies, we try replacing it. If you look on Evergreen Screening 3, you can see just above the trees, my neighbor's house. And progressing to Evergreen Screening 4, obviously more toward the southerly direction where the photos end. I wish it was better. I remember Village Springs fought the same battle for many, many years. Many decades to try to get their screening as good as it is now. Let's see, continuing forward, closer down to going clockwise, we show bushes and not there. They do exist. If you actually, let's see, look at photo screen number 2. You do see the tops of evergreens next to my wife's car with a rather large oak that's curved. I regret to say the trees in that area do get direct wash off from Route 320. And it's just been a fighting battle to try to get anything to grow there, right? Got a lot of dead trees. Okay, we already had looked at, let's see, the photo where Todd indicates does not exist and is moving the telephone pole in front of my garage. If that's incorrect. You actually, the telephone pole on the very last drawing correctly reflects its location. And we adjusted the curve of the driveway. We had a straight line previously. My 8-year-old son did the drawings, which he's pretty good at. He does a lot of our design drawings, and I review them for final approval, and I missed that too. He adjusted the line accordingly so that it is a curved line to match what's there. So I was correct in that part of the drawing. That needed to be adjusted. Let's see. Based on that, that is pretty much what Todd had put together, which brought a lot of good questions to light regarding this application. Now, there are things I've spoken with neighbors and otherwise regarding this issue of visibility of the trucks. And I actually spoke with our agent and I asked, you know, you can't leave here without going down a road where there is a plumbing contractor, triaxle dump truck, garage, electrician with ladders on his roof for piping. How many complaints have there been about people seeing this? And I've been given an impression virtually nothing. More complaints about old rotted out cars and other stuff like that. Which there's over 6,000 people in the town of Willington. This regulation originally was written, God, I remember the lawyer, I dealt with him quite a few times previously, out of Glastonbury. Did an excellent first pass. But I do bring up the concern that essentially, if 6,000 people in Willington have said nothing, don't complain, don't care, maybe we need to revisit these regulations at that section there for further clarification, or provide a policy guideline for the zoning agents. Again, Sue Jorgensen, if I can't read it, it's not advertising, it's not a problem. But we have a different sheriff in town. I mean, Mike is doing an excellent job trying to grab the bull by the horns. So with that in mind, that should be something, you know, obviously of discussion, whether today or when you revisit regulations to update and revise. Let's see. A minute. Okay. Again, my application and original documentation was related to safety, because there's a lot of misconceptions about propane as a fuel. Let's see, actually, I wish I had made copies, but it kind of, you know, it's a little shorter tonight. It's been a busy week. I got actually some statistics from NFPA and propane related fires. There were 10,600 fires. But where did they happen? Well, actually, those houses that caught fire nationally. They were related to grills, propane grills, and charcoal grills. 64% of US households own at least one outdoor barbecue grill or smoker. And the vast majority of the fires relate to people not cleaning and grease fires. I'm sure our fire department can attest to putting out a few grills in their time. For actual propane, if you had that many fires related to propane, they would have banned the use at the national level long ago, because this is just an annual number. 10 years, I mean, you're talking, God, over 200,000 fires. Yeah. Now, continuing on with that, that was NFPA. I took a look at OSHA and the Department of Labor. And there's incomplete statistics for 2022, but 2021, there are 8 injuries documented related to propane. And these are all keywords. So if propane was all in the write-up, it is there. Employee fractures rib from fall from elevation. God knows what he was doing propane up there. It did not allow it. Employee dies delivering propane found unresponsive on the ground. Again, doesn't appear to be propane explosion, fire, or otherwise. Employee fractures neck and fall. Employee is run over by asphalt roller and crushed and killed, apparently while using a propane torch on a road they were working on, heating the surface. Employee killed by carbon monoxide exposure. I can't speak to that. It's not clear whether it was a service technician or what happened. Employees run over by concrete truck and later dies. Similar kind of thing on a construction site. That was 2021. Naturally, if you go back to 2020, there's also only 8 under OSHA and the Department of Labor. Okay. This was actually from our friends up north, the Canadians. They had a very good write-up, and I'm sure we mirror their stuff. But propane tank is 24 times puncture resistant than a fuel tank containing gasoline, methanol, or ethanol. Propane, when leaked into the environment, does not create an environmental hazard. Leak a gallon of heating oil and you can pollute 1 million gallons of groundwater. Again, I can provide this, I did not have enough time to make copies on this here. Now, the other part that actually I found rather interesting was on the heating oil side, that most home insurance does not cover you if you have a leak and it becomes an environmental problem. I did have the experience once of being on a site. I was not personally involved with it other than knowing where the people operating, where they were crushing the house and going to put a new house on top of the foundation. The person crushing it did not pay attention to do a walkthrough and hit an oil tank in the basement, which went through a floor drain. And I can assure you DEP has no sense of humor that they know of. They arrived at the site and told them to excavate the foundation out and the soil 6 feet in every direction to try to contain that particular contamination issue. So it is a cleaner fuel by many stretches, especially since home heating oil is high sulfur. I can't run high sulfur in any equipment over the road. In terms of the green end of it, propane, they've come out with what's called renewable propane. It is negative carbon, very similar to biodiesel. Connecticut is one of the early states with an initiative to bring it in. They've actually got storage tanks in Hartford now. It was intended for buses and other vehicles for municipal use. And I think it will be the trend in the future as we try to go and make the environment better. Let's see. I've also brought an individual here with experience in the construction of propane trucks, the testing, the inspection, and a lot of anecdotal stories of just how durable these trucks are in the event of crashes. I did research prior to even considering this, talking to Westmore Tank. And some of their stories were brand new trucks doing 5 rollovers, tractor trailers, with no leaks. They refurbished the truck and the trailer and put the same driver back in it, which I kind of questioned the latter part, but I'm not the owner of that. Obviously, if the commission has questions, I can have them address you directly. I'm hoping that kind of gives you the propane interest that I have in it. Obviously, I open the commission to questions or members of the public.
All right, any questions from the commission? Go ahead.
Mr. Litwin, you said in one of these that you're only keeping 2 of your trucks, whether it's
Right.
septic or propane, or septic and propane.
Correct.
Where are the other 2 trucks going during that?
On my property, adjacent property, 187, or I may pull it behind 163 because the property moved around. I've got several roads there we left over from logging many years ago, and I utilize those. I've got orchards up and back, 80 fruit trees. I got skunk this year between drought and mice. I got 1 point. We divided it 4 ways at the table. It happens. That's why I'm not a farmer. So.
Other questions? Any questions? Yeah, I'm going to open it up to the public.
I have a question for Mr. Whitland.
Yeah.
Is 163 also under the realm of the DEP, in which the lot of 163 consists of 13 acres, in which 184 is for the business, the house, and also the garage, and the other 11 point whatever is designated forest land? Is that correct?
Essentially, that's the assessor's card you're referring to. The assessor breaks out property values. They assume a building lot, an already building lot, which they attach with the property for comparison of value. The additional land, any homeowner has the option, if you have enough acreage, you put it onto forestry or other areas. Essentially, under the agreement, you are not going to be destroying the property for putting up buildings and basically rendering it unfarmable, unusable. That's the intention of it. And it's a very good thing because otherwise most farmers in the area will be bankrupted by taxes.
All right, thank you, but that doesn't answer my question. I researched the DEP and also your card, and it basically states forest land is untouchable unusable, unbuildable, can't be stored upon. And also to my understanding, where you're referencing 187 next door, that is also classified as farmland, which you can't be on it.
Yes, I can provide my tractors and
Oh,
other
yeah.
equipment to use it. So in this case here, we are not providing something that's a permanent structure, or otherwise permanent. They have keys, ignition, and they move. It is not affecting anything that is related to the forestry of the property.
Are you
Obviously-
parking upon it?
Obviously, provide that documentation to me and I can further review it with council.
Okay, I will be presenting it tonight. Okay,
Other questions, comments from the public? Go ahead.
I just want to say, like, I've driven by his property many times.
Now you gotta state your name.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
Public hearing.
Nicholas Della 29. I've driven by his property many times. I've never seen it as an eyesore, and I think it was a good point. I mean, there's many businesses in town that are heating oil, electrician, they don't have anything in front. And not that I have anything against them, I'm just saying, to me, as somebody that drives by his property, I never think of it as an eyesore, and I think it's good to see a small business trying to expand into other things. I wish him luck on this.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
I'm Gene Poirier. I've been his neighbor for 60 years, and I feel the same way. Like to see him do well. You know, I'd like to see more businesses in town.
Thank you. What's your address, Gene?
153.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
I do have a.
All right, I know you have something you want to read.
I have a question.
No, go ahead.
Maureen Loach, 41 and 45 Cosgrove Road. When does a home occupation with multiple entities become required to change their registry over to a business, especially with commercial vehicles? When does that happen?
Mike, you have any light to shed on that? Because I don't.
I mean, there's no firm line in the regulations that says if you have 3 vehicles, you're a zoning permit, 4 vehicles, a special permit, because home occupations are probably the most diverse category of potential uses that we have. I mean, in 2021, I think the commission approved a home occupation for, I forget her name, 74, to have the lower floor for home as a children's dental clinic, I think. And then we have dog trainers and breeding and vets and tradesmen. It's such a wide, diverse category that there is no firm scale, because it would be applicable in some cases and not the others. It's really a context decision that the commission makes, but we don't have a written ceiling, if you will. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
It didn't, but nice explanation, but it didn't answer the question. When you have multiple businesses out of one residence and you have commercial vehicles that you're using on a daily basis.
Like an electrician or a plumber or?
No, I mean,
Anything
electrician,
else?
plumbers, we have people who live in our neighborhood, park their commercial vehicles on their land. However, they don't operate a home occupation. My question is, when does a home occupation become, is required to register as a commercial business once they have the occupation that they start out? It should really be a start out, and then they should branch off into a commercial site or commercial location. So when does that happen for a home occupation business is my question.
No, apparently it's not as black and white as you'd think it would be. So, all right, other questions? Comments? Yes, Ralph.
I'll chime in on this simply because
Ralph, name, address.
Ralph Toulis, 47 Villasville Road. I've known Dave for a long time. Dave was on this commission for a period of time. We both served together. I think what was trying to be asked here is more of a rhetorical question. When we were kicking around these regulations back in the 90s, one of the things that we were trying to do, we knew there were a lot of home occupations out there. And we didn't want to discourage it. And we also recognized that a lot of home occupations are an incubator for a full-blown business. And So the rhetorical question really is, when does a home occupation outgrow being considered a home occupation as opposed to a full-blown commercial enterprise? And I don't have the answer for you, and that's what you all got to reckon with, okay? Just because someone parks a commercial vehicle in their yard does not necessarily constitute an eyesore. If it's a vehicle they use for work and they drive it home and it's parked in their yard at night, but the business itself is located elsewhere, I would discount those as an argument saying that this is okay. Now, when Mr. Litwin first got his home occupation permit, there were conditions of approval that have been difficult for him to comply with. And as he expands, he's got to pay more attention to that. Furthermore, what he hasn't provided to you, and forgive me, Dave, is an A2 survey of a portion of the two adjacent lots. 163, 163,
163.
yeah, 163, 187, to clearly show where the dividing line is between the two parcels. Because if he's pursuing a home occupation for 163, but his home occupation is overflowing onto 187, then I think that's something that needs to be considered. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just think it needs to be considered. But certainly, if you're going to run a business, the best home occupation is the one that you don't know is there. I have one. It's a computer and a desk in my basement. You know, it's not, it's by right more than it is by special permit. Unfortunately for Mr. Litwin, what he does requires a lot of outside storage, outside materials, vehicles, whatever. So to tone down the imposition of that business on the neighborhood, the screening becomes essential. And be it vegetated screen, yeah, it's great if you can get things to grow, which we're not always lucky at, or we don't have to attack and the talent to do that. Fences work well. 6,000 people have a complaint. Well, that's kind of a flimsy statement, in my opinion. Dave's been here all his life. I've been here all my life. When people move in and they see something that exists, they're not necessarily going to complain about it because they're new. They're not going to challenge the status quo because they're new. But it's just the neighborhood. Keep it looking good. Run your business. Don't visually impose on anybody, and life is grand. That's all I'll say.
No, actually, can I speak to that?
Good.
Okay. When I was on site with Mike Model, president, we
Could you
discussed, oh,
speak up a little?
I'm trying.
Thank you.
When I was on site with Mike Model and Chris, we did discuss the potential for gates and other full screening kind of blocking, which I'd write the check tomorrow. If that's the case, so the commission's will. But also keep in mind, I would be the first one in the most obvious place because I would extend it across from where the telephone pole is all the way across the front. Because on Ruby, there's a lot of unusual people. If you notice, all of my property locations have steel gates on it because whether FedEx, truck stop, or college kids, they like to pull off, drink up, light up, shoot up. We've had police chases through my woods. So I would prefer to close it right off so that I have no concerns about visual other than somebody playing I Spy through the trees. But that significantly changes the character of Willington from a place that is very rural to starting to look more and more like a gated community. And again, the commission has to weigh that in. I have no problem putting it up. The week before my first commission meeting, I had somebody, my wife was out in her flower garden and somebody drove by a dozen times with their cell phone out the window slowly on Ruby Road. If you're driving slow, you stand up like a freaking fool. And, you know, she called me, I called the police. I did take a walk out there, and when the individual in the car saw me, they beat feet. If I was thinking they were of criminal intent, they probably would have only cased the place once or twice. A dozen times, for a guy that's annoying, for a woman, that is really creepy. I think you can't be in your own front yard working on your stuff. So again, a full obscure kind of gate and additional partitions for it to retract into is what I would do right now. So obviously, I mean, that's the best option I can see to meet, you know, Ralph's here expectations and obviously Todd's. Not a problem. Just got to decide.
Good, Ralph.
I just want to follow up. The problem that Mr. Lippman speaks about with respect to some of the strange people wandering around in our neighborhoods. I live on Village Hill, next to the little park that we kind of created when they replaced the bridge. You want to see strange people? Right by that. But the closing off of properties, rural properties, access to open woodlands, it's just a phenomena of society today. And yes, our neighborhoods are revolving because of that, particularly in rural areas. I see gates across driveways into the woods where when we were kids, it wasn't necessary. You know, I have a rear lot on Wellesley Road. I've got a big concrete block across that driveway, so people can't drive up in there because they will, and they do. So whether it's a fence or gates, that's the evolution of where society is going. And if you don't like it, well, you got to get up deeper in the woods somewhere else because it ain't Connecticut anymore, right? Just philosophical observation.
All right, further comments? Todd, you had something you wanted to?
Yeah. Kind of going backwards. Good evening. My name is Todd Bissonette. This is my fiance, Maureen Locholi. We own and reside at 141 Cosgrove Road, and we also own 45 Cosgrove Road. And I'd like to pass forward to the board a copy of my summary. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'd like to use Maureen's time to speak as a second resident to expedite our presentation. For we have combined our thoughts together to avoid presenting and repeating the same information. It should take about 15, 16
And
minutes.
this is new from what you talked about the last
It's
time?
basically, yes, it is, sir. Yes, it does intertwine due to the complex
I
situation.
understand some of that as long as the.
Okay.
mostly-
I will try to keep it as brief as possible, and I apologize. I'd like to say thank you to the commission in advance for the opportunity to speak and for your patience, for our presentation is a bit lengthy, but necessary. In part, the information we were presented was acquired from the state of Connecticut, Secretary of the State of Connecticut, the DEEP, and the Willington Town Records that pertains to 4 active businesses located at 163 Ruby Road and or 190 Ruby Road, which is relative to the subject of this Admiral expansion discussion, along with photos from Google Earth, TomTom road mapping, real estate sites, and current photos as of September 22nd. 4 active businesses that are registered with the state of Connecticut are 1 Admiral Septic, 2 Litwin Construction LLC, registered since about approximately 2000, Satisfaction Realty, registered since about 2002, and now we're adding Admiral Propane Services LLC, filed and registered June 14, 2021, approximately 16 months ago. These 4 businesses are also advertised upon the internet. All you gotta do is punch in the name, they will come up. All 4 of these businesses appear to be intertwined and related to each other, and it is troubling and confusing due to misrepresentation on documents. And when I ask questions, there are few answers, and the zoning agents refer me to the assessor's office, and the assessors refer me to the zoning agents. It appears that the assessor's office and the planning and zoning agents did not communicate each other in the past. And I'd like to state, this does not include the current assessors and zoning agents that are on duty now. They seem very professional, and they're really looking at things. Maureen and I are here tonight with several concerns pertaining to Dave Litwin's home occupation permit, site plan, and intentions for a special permit for his current
Excuse me,
address.
can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Martin, you said that the Litwin construction is advertised on the internet.
I punched it up
Can you
on Google.
explain that?
I punched in Litwin Construction LLC on Google and it comes up.
It comes up, but it isn't, I don't see that as an advertisement. I
It
see.
populates as it's there. It's
Well, sure,
original.
I mean, that's derived from the Secretary of State, I believe, but I mean, I don't see an actual advertisement. I just see a placeholder on the internet.
So and that's a part of my confusion, especially when I see it registered with the
Well,
Secretary of State.
I do George Marco when I come up, but I'm not advertising myself. I'm a name
Okay.
on the internet.
It's part of my
So-
confusion. It's a part of my
What are you
confusion.
confused about, sir?
Pardon me?
What are you confused
I'm
about?
confused is how is it four active businesses registered with the state of Connecticut? And
Well, you said they're advertised,
I'm saying.
registered and advertised, I see. I'm just trying to clarify.
No, I'm
You say
saying
they're advertised.
on within the internet, if you punch up a Google search and you punch up Litwin Construction LLC, it comes up, it states that it's an active business.
That's an advertisement to you?
To me, it is. It states that it's active, it's present, it's live, it exists.
So am I advertising myself when I Google me and I come up, just trying to understand?
You are displaying yourself, yeah, your address, who you are, your
Not by
birthday.
choice. Not by choice.
But sir, that's part of my confusion. That's why I'm here today.
Okay.
I'm really confused of, and if you let me proceed, it'll
Okay, no,
probably
I'm just trying
explain
to-
itself.
So, all right, so you just see that as advertising.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to understand.
Okay.
So please continue.
I lost my place. Hold on, sir.
Second paragraph down, page 2.
Okay, thank you. For the special permit in his home Admiral septic business to expand and to add an additional business that delivers propane and gas as well, along with the current home occupation permit, which is located at 163 Ruby Road in an R80 residential neighborhood. And trying to understand this propane expansion as to where the propane business is going to be added, I'd like to ask the commission to please correct me if I'm wrong. Of my understanding of regulation 11.01.01.01, it states the home occupation shall have no employees who are not permanent residents of the subject dwelling, and being the subject dwelling is 163 Ruby Road. That should be Mr. Litwin's residence. However, Mr. Litwin's property card, 163 Ruby Road and 190 Ruby Road, which are on file within town records, states that David Litwin's place of residence is 190 Ruby Road. But with confusion, and to my understanding, 190 Ruby Road has been a vacant lot and open space since approximately 2006. Therefore, the application is defective and should not be considered. I'd like to pass forward to the commission copies of 163 Ruby Road and 190 Ruby Road property cards, which state that 190 Ruby Road is David Litwin's residence that he has on file, in which David Whitland has been in non-compliance with zoning regulations 11.01.01.01 per his current home occupation permit and proposed special home occupation permit. If David Litwin is currently in non-compliance of his current home occupation permit, what can be expected if the business expands? What adds to my confusion and concerns is that Litwin Construction LLC has been on file with the Secretary of State as an active business since approximately the year 2000, with the residence, business, and mailing address listed as active business located at 190 Ruby Road, which is a vacant lot, open space, whereas the house was demolished around 2006. On January 23rd, 2022, Mr. Litwin, and I apologize for mispronouncing his name, filed with the Secretary of State, file number 0110269556, a change of residence, business, and mailing address of Litwin Construction to 163 Ruby Road from 190 Ruby Road. It appears that within the filings with the Secretary of State of Connecticut, file number 00068667660, dated March 31st, 2021, approximately 10 months earlier, Mr. Litwin updated the NAICS information, which is the business code, to include all other specialty trade contractors to Litwin Construction. LLC, which is now located at 163 Ruby Road. I'd like to pass forward to the commission a copy of such files and details with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut. Questions I have and concerns that I have for the commission is Litwin Construction LLC a part of the expansion with an Admiral Septic and a propane delivery expansion, which therefore it would include all other specialty trade contractors would be located and operating on 163 Ruby Road property, which is in an R80 residential neighborhood. Another concern is another business is located on 163 Ruby Road named Satisfaction Realty Inc., which is registered as active and has filed with the Secretary of State of Connecticut since approximately 2002, which David acknowledged. On June 14, 2021, approximately 15 months ago, under the title name of Satisfaction Realtor Inc., not Mr. Whitland's own name, Mr. Whitland filed with the Secretary of State of Connecticut, file number 000-730-4326 for a certificate of organized limited liability company for a company named Admiral Propane Services LLC, which is now located at 163 Road, per Secretary of the State of Connecticut. On January 23rd, 2022, approximately 9 months later, after filing and creating Admiral Propane Services under LLC, under the title of Satisfaction Realty with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, Mr. Litwin again filed with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, file number 001019099119, with updated information added to the file, admiralsales@propaneservices.com. It appears that Admiral Services LLC, located at 163 Ruby Road, is a registered active business for the Secretary of the State of Connecticut since June 14, 2021. I would like to pass forward to the commission a copy of such files and details on file with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut. As per, and I apologize if I'm going too fast, if you want me to slow down, I will. As per the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, there are at least 4 registered active businesses at 163 Ruby Road, in which 3 appear to be commercial. Admiral Septic, Linwood Construction LLC, Satisfaction Realty Inc., and now we add to the mix Admiral Propane Services LLC. I'd like to ask the commission, what are David Litwin's intentions? And does the home occupation of this size, or when does a home occupation of this size become reclassified as a commercial business? I am concerned and would like to ask the board, is this consistent with regulation 11.01.02.02 that reads, the home occupation shall be secondary, insubordinate, and incidental to the residential use of the property. It shall not impair the residential character or of the premises and the neighborhood. I would like to present to the commission a copy of Admiral Septic application for certificate of zoning compliance dated November 14, 2012, and also a copy of Mr. Litwin's special permit application discussed at the September 13th, 2022 Planning and Zoning meeting. Taking note of Mr. Litwin's application for certificate of zoning compliance dated November 14th, 2012 on file with the town within the records, it states no outside evidence of business or trucks are not to be visible from road or adjacent property as per the zoning agent, Susan Jorgensen, which that has not been the situation as provided by the pictures that have been presented to the board. In part of Mr. Litwin's application dated November 14th, 2012, Mr. Litwin did not provide pertinent aspects and information of his proposed Admiral Septic business that would involve the use and parking of 2 vac trucks, a backhoe, an excavator, a box truck, a dump truck, and a large trailer. In addition, Mr. Litwin stated there will be no evidence or sign of home occupation. It appears that Mr. Litwin left out some pertinent aspects and information. I would like to pass forward information acquired from Admiral Septic's website that demonstrates the service and equipment needed to perform such jobs, which is not just 2 vac trucks. Taking note of Mr. Litwin's application for special permit for expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery services presented at the Planning and Zoning meeting on September 13th, 2022. He again has not listed the approximately 7 commercial vehicles and equipment associated with Admiral Septic business. And now he would like to add 2 more commercial propane delivery trucks and a box service vehicle to be parked on 163 Ruby Road within an R80 residential neighborhood. Again, he has not listed pertinent aspects and information pursuant to 11.01.03.01. Therefore, his application appears to be in non-compliance and defective. I would like to ask the commission to have Mr. Litwin clarify what is the need or purpose of a box truck service vehicle for, considering he is applying for propane delivery only? Or is the box truck service vehicle going to be utilized for propane tank repairs and installation, which may include plumbing and all other specialty trade contractors under Litwin Construction LLC, which is also an active registered business with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut and also located at 163 Ruby Road. On September 13, 2022, at the Planning and Zoning meeting, Mr. Litwin was asked by a board member if he had room to add the vehicles associated with the propane delivery business expansion. And I believe Mr. Litwin responded, yes, I have 80 acres. That does not appear to be a truthful answer, as the property card for 163 Ruby Road states that 163 Ruby Road is a 13-acre parcel with 11.16 acres zone forest. I'm sorry, 11.16 acres zone forest, leaving 1.84 acres for the house, garage, and the list of current and proposed commercial vehicles and equipment mentioned earlier to be parked abound. Where are the property boundaries and pins for the 1.84 acres on the site plan as required? As residents and property owners of Willington, we have concerns that approximately 10 commercial vehicles and equipment being parked on 163 Ruby Road on 1.84 acres within an R80 residential neighborhood, along with 4 active businesses registered with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut, but only 1 business is on file within the town records. On September 13, 2022, I presented photos to the commission that demonstrates the non-compliance issues related within section 11 of the town regulations pertaining to parking and the evidence of the home occupation, business, documents of employees, which is against the regulations, along with photos, which are actual. Photos do not tell a lie, they tell the truth, which show there is no natural evergreen bush or screenings, and the 12 feet of driveway and apron that is drawn on the site plan does not exist per the site plan that Mr. Litwin provided. I would like to present to the board other photos that show the parking of Admiral Septic vehicles, which are in view of the road, in front of the house, the garage, while being in view of the Willington residence, which is a non-compliant to regulation 11.01.01.02. I apologize for any doubles of the photos. You already might have some. I would like to pass forward to the commission a copy of David Litwin's site plan, photos of part of the driveway and apron that does not exist, and photos of no current evergreen screen taken from Google Earth, TomTom road mapping site, and actual photos taken September of 2022, in which the site plans appears to have numerous issues that are not consistent with the regulations. 1, there is no evergreen screening. 2, there are no bushes for screening. Both there's weeds in vines, which are only present for about 3 months out of the year, as zoning agents have depicted. There is no legend on the site, and it is not actually drawn to scale, which is one of the confusions I had in some of the questions that Mr. Litwin did point out. I was confused. I had no idea what was upon that print. I was surmising what it was to be. He's supposed to be supplying one that is factual and legible. There is no approximate 12 feet of driving or apron to the right of the garage, as drawn in the site plan. There are no boundary lines to show that the business is not on forest land. What is the current or proposed on the site plan? Parking is not noted for all equipment and vehicles associated, current and proposed for the business. Is the Berry propane tank associated with the application? There is no visible boundary lines, and it appears that part of the business parking is upon 187 Ruby Road, which is zoned forest land, which is not applicable to have vehicles parked upon it due to tax breaks, et cetera, as per the DEEP. The application to expand Admiral Septic to include propane delivery appears to be entered with unclean hands, defective, and appears to be incomplete, and does of the required information pursuant to 11.10.03, pursuant to 11.01.03.01, a detailed statement describing all pertinent aspects of the proposed activity, acknowledging the requirements of this section. The required information has not been provided. Therefore, the application appears to be defective and in non-compliance. Pursuant to 11.01.03.02, an accurately drawn plot plan to scale or a sketch with pertinent dimensions depicting property lines, structure locations, access drives, parking spaces, screening, existing and proposed, and any other pertinent features. The required information has not been provided. Therefore, the application appears to be defective and in non-compliance. Pursuant to 11.01.03.03, an accurately drawn floor plan to scale depicting the area to be utilized by the proposed activity. The required information has not been provided. Therefore, the application appears to be defective in non-compliance. In closing, Willington is a beautiful town and it has boards like yourself to protect the interests of the town and the residents that live within it by overseeing that the rules and regulations are followed. For without rules and regulations, everyone would just do whatever they wanted to do, and so society would be chaotic. In finalizing your decision, I hope the commission considers Mr. Litwin's past history, present practices brought before you of non-conformance issues to the regulations while thoroughly reviewing his application to expand, whereas no accurate plot plan has been provided in a detailed statement describing all pertinent aspects of the proposed activity have not been provided as required within the regulations. Mr. Whitman needs to operate his business within the parameters of the rules and regulations, and there appears to be too many inconsistencies with his past practice, current application, and filings with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut. I asked the commission to require Mr. Litwin to adhere to the town's regulations of his current home occupation business before considering the propane expansion, while also investigating all 4 active businesses on file for Mr. Litwin with the Secretary of State located at 163 Ruby Road. I have something I want to add as, that's not included in my presentation. The plot plan that Mr. Whitman provided, I did do some drawings on in red that clearly show that part of the driveway in the apron, by the photos that are actual, it's not there. Entrance in and out of the driveway is dangerous. There is a telephone pole in the way. You can only exit one way. Considering the accidents that have happened on that street, to be coming out with propane where you got to stick the nose of a truck that's hauling 2,800 gallons of propane is somewhat dangerous. Mr. Litwin's has not provided any documentation to support his speculative ideas and thoughts of what the business should and shouldn't be. There are detailed descriptions in zoning regulations that says what the business should include and what it shouldn't include. He agreed to these in 2012. And now here we are in 2022, 10 years later, and he's commenting that he can't get trees to grow. Well, it's obvious this has been going on for 10 years. I've witnessed it for the past 6 years, the vehicles parked. I've shown pictures that I didn't take. They come from Google Earth. They come from real estate sites. They also came from the town's website of the trucks that are present and in violation of the regulations. I'm not turning around and saying Mr. Whitman shut down your business or asking the board to do it. I'm asking Mr. Litwin to conform. I've used him on 2 occasions to try to keep the business in town. It's not fair to the other residents, and once it starts, it grows. You let one, you let them all. And that's what I'm here trying to say. Mr. Whitland is wrong. I believe he is wrong in his understanding of the use of state land. He has 1.84 acres to house 10 heavy-duty equipment and vehicles. Okay, the rest is in state forest land for a break. He cannot encroach upon that. He can't go upon 130. He can't go upon his lot next door of 187, and he can't go backwards unless he takes it out of that zoning regulation per the DEEP, to my understanding. And those are facts. Those are coming from the Secretary of State. Those are coming from the town records. Those are coming from photos that are presented from websites and actually from his own sites of the equipment that he's using. What I'm asking for is that we would not be here today if it was put on the back 40. Put it out of sight, out of mind, not in front of the driveway, not parked between the trees, the bushes in the front of the house, as photos show. Not along the side of the driveway, 60 feet in, 50 feet in, trucks lined up to exits. Put them behind where they're not seen. Thank you for the presentation or listening, and I apologize for the length of it.
All right, further questions from the public?
Just a quick comment, McTello 49 Merrill. I mean, there's business on Moose Meadow, construction over there. They don't have fence up, which I have no problem. There's companies on Baxter Road, electrician and a dog groom, and they don't have fence up, which I have no problem. I think if we're gonna force him to put this wall or fence or trees or whatever, let's hold a standard to businesses that are in the same type of environment. Again, I have no problem with those other businesses. It's just, I don't feel as though we should just come down on him and let these other businesses, you know, operate with no tree covers in front of their trucks and such. That's all I have.
I have a comment, 4145 Cosgrove Road. We wouldn't be here today if we did not know that Mr. Litwin was now applying for an additional business, because Mr. Litwin is under the caption of home occupation. Those other businesses that this gentleman is referencing, I don't know if he knows whether they're under a business entity or a home occupation. That makes a huge difference when you're presenting these arguments. So this gentleman may need to go and confirm that information before he presents other people. One person got caught. I'm speeding on the highway. I got caught. Sir, the rest of the cars were speeding. I got caught. So Mr. Litwin is being called to take his business beyond his, beyond the visible areas of the citizens.
Go ahead.
Nicholas Litwin, 163 Ruby Road. Didn't Mr. Litwin already go over the existing businesses at 163 Ruby Road? Didn't he already go over the 4 of them in detail?
Yeah, earlier he described them. That
Okay,
would
I'm just trying to
accurate.
figure out if he was saying that in response.
No, this was probably written before, whatever, I get it. All right, to be fair to the people that are online, do we have anyone online that has a comment or question? Any hands up? I gotta try to do a better job with people online. I just get like fixated on what's going on in front of me.
I don't see anybody.
Okay,
They can unmute themselves if they need to.
okay,
I don't see anything.
all right. Further questions or comments from people in attendance here? Public commission have any further? Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I got one thing. I believe that this was a special permit. So, Mr. Bissonette, you referenced the regulation 1101-0101. It says a home occupation shall have no employees. But if you look at page 1101-0201, under a special, that is for a home occupation by certificate of the zoning commission. But then you have home occupation by special permit. 1101-0201 allows for 2 non-resident employees. If you then go into the special permit regulations in your presentation, and you reference other parts of it. So
since this was under the special permit, 2 non-resident employees would be allowed, if I'm interpreting it correctly. That's my understanding.
I agree with you, I believe. We're here today because.
That's not fine. That's all I just wanted, because you said it falls under 110101. No.
Well, I'd like to
but that would not-
clarify. So.
So we have a special permit. And the second part is, I don't think that our special permit references 163 Ruby Road,
It doesn't.
regardless of what the tax.
It does not reference
Well, I'm looking
160.
at
We are applying for a home special
The
permit.
2012 one right here, I'm holding it, copy of it. Says 11/12, 11/14, 2012, location of property, 163 Ruby Road.
That's within that one. I'm referencing the records within town where he claims his residence is for
Well, the
whatever
tax,
reason.
the tax records are not, this application in 2012 references 163. We're not, what the tax record says, that probably is a good thing to clarify, but it's not really germane to the application.
It is when considering there's a regulation that you have to be upon the primary residence.
But
And-
the tax records are not zoning records. This is. the
When I
application.
bought 145, they changed my billing, 145 Cosgrove Road. They changed the billing address, a residence address immediately. Mr. Litwin has 4 pieces of property, whether it's relevant or not. All 4, as you mentioned, Hancock, state that he also lives at 190 Ruby Road.
We did at
After-
one point, correct? It burned down, right?
Can't live
Right,
there
it's
now.
been
right?
burned down since '04.
Yeah, that was. well,
After 20 years, one would think if you're applying for special permits, home occupation permits, and filing with the state, you would update your information unless there's an alternative motive. But
Well,
it-
advice well taken, but again, our permit is for 163 Ruby Road, so I don't really see that. Those are just the 2 points I wanted to make. It looks like our application is, his original application 2012 seems proper as his residence, because.
I'm hearing though, Andy, and just
Yeah.
the main, one of the biggest complaints here is the visibility.
Absolutely right. No, I'm just saying,
Okay.
but I mean, we're hearing evidence in the
The-
public
the
hearing, and I
biggest-
want to make sure we get it right.
I understand the biggest complaint is that.
There are other alternatives. There are artificial trees. There are other things besides
Yeah.
fences. Would that be anything within your thought process?
Actually, if we flip to the,
Thought.
last diagram. last page.
I'll get to you guys.
Okay,
Basically, if you look across the front, somebody driving, can look down the paved driveway and see vehicles there. That is really, I think, I'm assuming Tom would be correct to say that's the most obvious. You know, looking through the trees and bushes, I mean, it's kind of secondary, but looking down the driveway, you're gonna see something. I mean, I have to access the street one way or another.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
There's other alternatives.
Right.
Fencing. That was the only thing. There wasn't any
Yeah,
other.
the driveway's the big hitter, I think, in terms of coming up with something for providing an obscure kind of privacy gate type of privacy block. You know,
Yes, Todd.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to clarify with Andy, when you're speaking of, or when we're speaking of 163 conversive to 190, as far as in 2012, he applied for a home occupation by
Right.
certificate.
Yeah.
And then and these are together. He is currently under that home occupation by certificate while applying for a special permit. That's to expand the business, which you are correct. Under the home occupation, if I'm correct in my understanding, home occupation by certificate, there are to be no non-residential employees. And
I
under the
thought this
special
was a
permit, you're
special
allowed
permit.
two.
So I could be wrong about that.
No, it's not.
Okay. So this is just a certificate. This is not a special permit. Thank you for clarifying. That's what I was trying to understand.
It's a hard story to tell. It's somewhat complicated.
Yeah, goes back a ways.
All right, any further questions? Yes, Bob. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So maybe a way out of this is to reduce the amount of your
property on 163, reduce the amount of forest land by 5 acres, so you can park your trucks further back away from.
I'd probably just take it all off if it came down to it, if that was
Well, I
the
mean,
main
you have
thing.
to have,
but I think it's kind of,
you have to have 5 acres to have.
right, I think it's kind of a moot point, really, because the thing I hear is from Todd, you know, if they're all in back, it's not a problem. But you are then pulling up DEP and saying you can't do that in back, which, let's face it, obviously property rights, there's a certain point where you gotta go and make a reasonable assumption what's realistic. If somebody goes and parks their boat behind the house, they're not starting a boating business. But if they park their electrician's van behind it, is that home occupation? It all depends. If they want to park it at their father's house, does that mean that they're using it differently? Again, I look at it here, it really comes down to, and I think from Todd's perspective, nobody else as far as I know, the view from the street is the concern. I mean, eventually, you know, like Todd had Google Earth and a bunch of other stuff, the commission's gonna have to weigh in on aerial surveillance, the use of drones, and really how admissible it is to any issue in zoning. Case law is building that area, tends to be favoring homeowner privacy law. But zoning regulations are retroactive. We look backwards, see what worked, and look forward to what we need to change it to. So this brings in bigger issues. But is it applicable to this application at this time? I'm not sure.
I hear from all the back and forth that there's
Yeah.
visible trucks that are
Right.
there near it into your neighbor.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the biggest issue that,
Mhm.
from where I sit, what I'm hearing. But
Yes, it's just to touch upon it. It's, you don't need a drone. You don't need aerial. You don't need Google. Take a drive. Take a drive. Give yourself another 2 weeks when all the weeds fly down. Just take a drive. That's all. It's a very simple. Rules are rules. Rules are to be followed. And that's all we're asking for. All of these synopsises of what's relevant, what's not relevant. You can't have it all. You want your land be zoned basically tax-free. You want to keep it, but you want to put things in the front. I agree with Commissioner Bob Shabbat. Put it in the back. It's a very simple solution. There's no ifs, ands, or whatever. Rules are rules. He agreed in 2012 that it would not be seen. And that's what the regulations state. And whatever everyone else is doing, if they have electrician's truck, okay, they park in the back, they go to work. My neighbor across the street works for a mechanical, he parks his van. Okay, there's no issues. We're talking 10 pieces of equipment that are in, by the photos, you see them parked between the bushes. You see them parked up against the garage. You see them in clear view from the road, 60 feet away. That's not what the regulations say. The if, the ands, and the twists and the turns. Regulations state what it's supposed to be. It's that simple.
all right, anything else to add to this? Go ahead, state your name again, please.
Nicholas Ronald, 163 Ruby Road. Didn't Mr. David Litwin go over the vehicles that he had and that they were transitory? That the ones that were on the drawing submitted to the board were the ones that were going to be the ones seen there? Whereas transitory has to change the oil somewhere. So what exactly is the issue with the 10 vehicles if there's only going to be the number of ones on the drawing visible at any given time? So I'm just wondering if Todd can clarify on that. Thank you.
All I'm stating is what I see, what it takes to perform. I've watched him work on other sites during the course of the past couple of years. The equipment that he has, it always returns, that's a domicile parking of all of those pieces of equipment. Now he wants to add 3 more. And if it's out of sight by regulations, it's not an issue. It's out of sight. That's all I'm saying. He could have 100. If they're way in the back, he's abiding by what he agreed to. Instead of being up in front of the road. It's that simple.
Anything new to add here? Other than we're going back and forth now. Anything new to add to this? The issue seems to be the visibility of these vehicles, and that certainly seems like something that needs to be taken care of. All right. Anything else from the commission? All right, gonna make a motion to close public hearing PZ 22-11, special permit application for expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery at 163 Ruby Road. Applicant owner David Livlin.
I just want to jump in, sorry,
Go ahead.
I wanted to clarify, we were able to connect with the new fire marshal, and he doesn't have any concerns or comments or anything that he wanted to.
Okay. And this is for the two bobtails.
We sent him everything that was part of the application.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a second on the motion to close the? All in favor? Aye.
Hi, this is Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
I use it still. Okay. That brings us to PZ 22-13. Text amendment application pertaining to modifications to the strategic development zone. Section 12.15, applicant James Marshall. This was postponed from 9/13, so.
You guys want to take fiber before this might be done, but it's up to you.
I don't, how's the rest of the commission feel?
Up to you.
You want to just move through or you want to take a break? Move through, go ahead.
Do you mind if I grab a little bit?
Go ahead.
So thank you very much. Thanks for your consideration of this application. My name is James Marshall, 46 Rochelle Road. I'm the applicant for PZ 2213. And I am an architect by trade. I come at this with that professional background, understanding utilizing zoning regulations in my professional practice and their implementation. So I come from that perspective, just as a general point of background. Just to start with a couple of background points that I'd be remiss if I didn't, say up front. I do want to make note that there is that I have submitted a complaint regarding the that you should have received as part of your correspondence. I'm not going to go into detail with it here, but it was regarding the inappropriate discussion and inaccurate discussion regarding my application for most recent Economic Development Commission meeting on 9/14. It also included a complaint about Mr. Admiral, our zoning agent, who also serves on the Economic Development Commission as a consultant, and the lack of proper advice related to the discussion at that hearing that day. I state this largely in an effort just so that it's not lingering over the conversation. To come, I understand that my best recourse here is just to discuss the merits of the application, which.
That would be the best recourse. We have your letter. I've read it, and I'm sure the other commissioners will as well.
Second, I just want to personally, since this is the first opportunity we've had since the close of PZ 2210, I just want to thank you all for your efforts once again, as this was kind of adjacent to this application, for the way you handled the hearing, and for all of your effort throughout the course of that public hearing. Thank you for hearing everybody, giving everybody the chance to speak, and thank you for denying it. I think it's a thanks to shared by a great many here, and potentially watching online. So thank you. So by way of a little bit of background on this application, the intent here and the cause for it is that often with new regulations, unintended flaws or inadequacies that may not be identified or tested, or may not be identified until the regulations actually utilized in practice. As it was recently adopted, it now has been tested for the first time and quite extensively through PZ 2210 for trade center 84. So the unintended weaknesses of the regulation have now been brought to light to a degree, which prompts the suggestion of this text amendment and associated discussion. Now, although
some of the concerns I'm going to raise here are magnified by the extreme scale of PZ 2210. They are applicable to any application or any use, any project going before the SPZ. You know, whether it's a 1.5 million square foot warehouse or a 10,000 square foot Dollar Tree, it doesn't matter. The same concerns could apply regardless of scale. Scale is one of the many issues about this application that I'd like to address. So this application seeks to do two things. The first is that it seeks to revise and refine the requirements of section 1215 for the strategic development plan. The most prominent changes in this regard are related to eliminating the proactive application process, as I believe it provides an insufficient level of detail and due diligence to properly evaluate a potential project for appropriateness in this town and as a part of the plan of conservation and development. Ultimately, the strategic development zone intent is a request for special consideration of use based on strategic town benefit or need that would not otherwise be allowed in the underlying zone. And as a special consideration, it should be subject to a higher level of due diligence than is afforded by the proactive application process. It also seeks to set reasonable limitations on project size in section 12.15, the SPZ, as allowed by the proposed use, and apply additional more stringent due diligence application requirements for approval. The second request as a part of this application is for the incorporation of a warehouse use and warehouse subcategory use definitions within section 5 of the use regulations and corresponding updates to 5.11 table of uses to include such newly defined uses. You know, and I raised this point during the discussion, and I don't want to relitigate PZ 2210 at all, but it's a good, it's what's the word I'm looking for at this point? It's a case study at this point. You know, a warehouse is a very common building use type and one that has developed into a variety of present day subcategories that all vary distinctly in intensity of use and intensity of impact of overall site development. I do not include, I'm not pretending to be a land use agent. You know, I come from a different background, but although no specific definitions or language are provided as a part of that request for the application, because it seeks to allow this commission, as it can potentially be a more complex integration throughout the document, to try to develop the best integration of these uses within the overall context of the ordinance. I would, however, specifically consider ask the commission to specifically consider the following as they may greatly vary in intensity of use from a traditional warehousing or storage use. General storage, distribution centers, high cube warehouses, fulfillment centers, you know, there's cold storage, there's a variety of subcategories, all of which vary. I'm not saying we need to necessarily define every distinct one, but there are groupings of various intensity that should be evaluated by this commission. So all of that being said, I do truly hope that this application, you know, becomes an open back and forth discussion, both with the members of the commission and also anybody in the public who wants to comment. The best ideas and regulations come from, you know, public input. So, I mean, your rejection of PZ 2210 really just served to alleviate the, you know, the imminent threat, for lack of a better word, to this town. This application tries to triage, you know, a little bit of the urgent need, but I'm well aware that there's probably a much more involved discussion that the PZC can, you know, select to take to, you know, fully update the regulations to alleviate some of the concerns raised. I do hope that regardless of any decision made specifically to this, that you continue to follow through in your own work to rectify the concerns raised here through this process if they're not directly addressed. And please, stop me at any time if there's any questions. Again, you know, I want this to be an open discussion as much as applicable. So before we get into too much detail, I want to give a little background on some of this. initial drafts of the SDZ, section 1215, and likely those that went to Prague for review, appear to have not, based on meeting minutes, reviewed meeting minutes and meeting discussion of this commission, appear to have likely not included the product application process initially. Based on your January 4th and January 18th PZC meeting minutes and discussion. The 118, the January 18th meeting, provided approval to send the draft as written to Prague for comment. This early drafts, and I can't be verified because for some reason the early draft is not available as documentation in support of your commission's own application. One would think that a draft that was submitted for record to Prague as a part of this text memo should be available to the public. I hope it can be found so that we can look at it, because I think it's a relevant point to see where this started. Because there were changes that were made, I believe, and you guys can correct me if you're wrong, you lived through it, between whatever was submitted to Prague and what was ultimately discussed at public hearing, which did include the proactive application process. The Prague comment letter received on 12/2/17, February 17th, there's a 35-day, I think, requirement for review. So it was submitted to Prague on the 18th or soon after, and they got comments back on the 17th. But at the EDC meeting on the 9th of February, Mr. D'Amato reviewed the draft. That draft that had been submitted, he noted that he had reviewed the draft submitted with, I want to phrase this correctly, a few contacts in the development community for a critical review, as they would be the end users. This, again, was all based on some of the public hearing comment from PZ 2210 was related to interest that had been expressed by the developer. I question what prompted the change to include the proactive application process as a part of this ultimate hearing and regulation. Again, I hope we can find that earlier draft. But the proactive application process was added after the fact, and it is a lesser level of due diligence than was originally entertained and what was originally sent to Prague for review. So there are no beefed up standards of design inherent in the proactive application process, which I know is repeatedly expressed during the discussion developing this initial strategic development zone. It might have been initially, and the standard application process in here does include some additional due diligence requirements that I think are warranted. But the proactive application completely avoids that intent. So none of the safeguards that were intended are really in there now with the inclusion of the proactive application process. It's a cause for concern. The SDZ is intended to be used for key, large-scale, and more substantially impactful developments. But again, with the proactive application process, there's a substantially lesser degree of due diligence required to determine appropriateness. It lowers the bar for the developer at the risk to the town. These regulations are set up to prevent unwanted development and encourage wanted development in town, but not to favor outside developers' interests over those of the residents of this town. There should be safeguards in place. That's one of the main arguments of this that I'd like to continue to discuss. So modification, another point here, just for Al, because I'm going to harp on Al, I'm asking to strike the proactive application process out of this document. It's almost pointless. It's unfair to both the town because it doesn't allow you guys the level of due diligence required as part of the application to make a determination. But it can also be unfair to the developer and defeat the whole purpose of the proactive application process as well. The modification procedures trigger a do-over, as was repeatedly discussed. have such a narrow margin of flex that there really is no flexibility entailed there. If somebody were to come back after the proactive application process and change their application by 2,000 feet of green space, or 5% or more, which, you know, at 20,000 square feet is not a lot of area, he's got to go back and start all over again, but you've given him a prior proactive application approval. So now you're saying he can go ahead and do the extra due diligence at cost to him. You know, when he doesn't necessarily know what he needs yet. It's so counterproductive to the person, its purpose just doesn't make sense. So to be honest, it just makes sense, which is why I'm proposing it, to me at least, to just go ahead with the traditional application. One other note, because this obviously was submitted to CROG like everything else, is required to be. Regarding the CROG comments that were received upon review of this application, I want to just make note of several points. This response by CROG is just that. They are comments. They are not requirements or directives. They are simply comments for consideration without the benefit of any of this discussion, or, you know, open discussion about the merits of the application. It does specifically note that this application finds no apparent conflict with the concerns of neighboring towns, which is the reason we're sending it to CROG in the first place. It does make reference to potential conflict with policies around regional efforts. It goes on other things, but due to a substantial increased burden on developers. Now, although I have not reviewed the regulations for all of Northeast Connecticut, I have reviewed the general regulations for all of the neighboring towns listed in the distribution on that CROG list. Which are Tallinn, Ellington, Stafford, Mansfield, Coventry, Ashford, and Union. And not one of them has anything nearly as fully town-wide or all-encompassing, combined with such a minimal level of due diligence as this SDC regulation currently has. A few do have overlay districts, but they are very targeted to specific key zoning districts and are much more highly design regulated with narrower allowed use limitations. Mansfield is a pretty fair example of this, I believe. But Union is probably the closest approximation in that list right there with their special development zone. But again, their height and coverage requirements are limited to 35 feet and 50%, which is way less than allowed by the SDC. And all projects require a special permit level of submission and review requirements as a part of that application. There is no separate concept zone change plan at a low bar like the project application process. And ultimately related to CROG, I argue that it's not this commission's or this town's responsibility to carry the weight of such an open-ended and developer-friendly regional need that they claim could be potentially be affected by this at such a great risk to the protection of Willington residents from inappropriate or unwanted development. It's just, it makes no sense. So let's go in before we talk about warehouse uses and go into the actual text amendment if you guys have it available. It's actually, it looks like a lot of red, and I apologize. There was apparently some differentiation in my original submission that had these insertions directly applied over the text. And for the record, if Mike is willing to, share the native text file of this, I am happy to provide a clean copy with, annotated revisions for y'all. It's difficult to do on PDF, and quite frankly, if I tried to do it as a text file, it just would have been more confusing. So, so what I gave you, and I'm going to have you guys look at. It doesn't matter when you look at, but if you look at the one we annotated, there's a page following that has the insertions and deletions of the changes made. And there are individual numbers 1, 2, and 3 per page, so it relates the comments to. So page 1, and again, ultimately, overarching on all this is everything I just discussed. The first comment on that page is on the 3rd line down. It is just a typo. I'm going to give you guys that one for free. So you're required to do the zone change no matter what happens to correct that. The second, that's the only thing on that page, to be honest with you. But I will make a note just for open discussion about 1215.2 regarding the vision. You know, much of A through F subcategories, much of that application intent and appropriateness that's striven for, that you strive for in that vision, really can't be accurately determined through the proactive application process. Moving on to 1215.3, eligibility and boundaries. There is the first insertion related to parcel size. Related to parcels not located within the DC and DI zones. Now, you know, I do have some understanding that based on the prior discussion, we're trying to focus this, not get it into, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but the South Willington, you know, village zone that was just created, you didn't see that that is an appropriate use, or you're trying to target it. But limiting this to ZC, DI, and then residential use zones, it basically covers the entire town. There is, you know, no limitation of use here. It's town-wide, and this is meant to be large-scale development. 5 acres doesn't really suit that need in a residential district to me. I've thrown out a number here of 20 acres. I think there are probably alternate approaches to this that can be, you know, that can be looked at. If the interest is really in developing West Willington, why don't we create a West Willington, well, it's West Willington development zone and allow the SDZ to be applied to that to a certain degree. You know, there are a number of ways to do that, which is why I said this is, again, just the start of an open discussion, I hope. The following 3 items are just text amendment, because that text basically says, as reference to 2 application processes, and I'm trying to make it fun. So it's just clarification of that. It strikes the first sentence, it says it must be concurrent to the traditional application process. So the traditional applications must include a map. There are 2 parts. One is the map amendment, and the 2 is a special permit. It's saying that they must be done together instead of the pro application, which allows you to separate the zone change from the actual special permit. So again, it's just text amendment. The traditional application, and again, there's no changes to this text, but the traditional application has some good points to it in the description, noting that it's trying to achieve a higher level of review and engineering early in the process. That's great. It also allows for the review. It allows, it vets the appropriateness of the special circumstance request with enough detail to validate the merits, but alleviates or allows for final approval to be attained quickly, which I know is the intent, right? It's trying to release regulatory hurdles, which is great. The proactive application, on the other hand, the next 2 comments are just striking it. It basically recognizing some of the things that I've said, that the purpose of the zoning ordinance is not to protect developers over the interests of the town. So we'll move on to the next page really quick. There is, okay, so there's only 1 strike on this next page, which is page 3 of the SDZ. And this is going to be a theme a little bit throughout. There's a lot of clarity of definition for level of design required that needs to be clarified. There's interchange of conceptual level and schematic level design throughout this document that is very confusing to the level and clarity of intent that is required of any application. A conceptual, at least in my world, a conceptual plan is a very low, but it's a concept. It's a napkin sketch. It's, you know, a base level just to give an understanding of what you're doing. It doesn't have a lot of detail. Schematic design is a higher level of detail. You know, it provides clarity of intent. It's schematic design is closer to a 30% level of honestly design rather than conceptual, which is probably has a much lower bar. You know, neither of those terms technically, quite frankly, and I might have missed the bar on this discussion a little bit, really amount to a 70% level of design. You know, but again, there's this terminology clarity that needs to happen throughout this document. So the proactive application process is actually more comparable to a schematic level of design, and it should be clarified to read that way, which is about 30%. So it strikes conceptual from that.
Are you
line.
striking the whole paragraph or just the words?
I'm just striking the word conceptual. It's just saying site plans, one or more sheets depicting the proposed schematic design of the site.
Just
Yeah. So again, just trying to get more detail. For clarity. Moving on to page 4, and stop me from going too fast and probably going too slow. So this comment is an assertion at the end of supporting materials required by this traditional application process. It looks for a traffic impact analysis prepared by a licensed professional engineer. And I'm seeking to add such analysis should follow applicable industry standard and should be representative of the most intensive interpretation of the proposed use on the proposed site. There was a lot of back and forth, and this is highlighted in PZ 2210, again, as a case study, the proposed use. And again, it relates to the warehouse use definition as well. This seeks to provide a most intense requirement, a most intensive use of this, of the interpretation of the proposed use. So basically what it does is it makes them comply to the highest possible standard something could be as proposed, rather than them, for example, using PZ 2210 as a case study. It was 150, category 150 warehousing with the traffic implications of that. Whereas 155 had significantly higher. Both would have been allowable, as a warehouse use, as our current regulation defines. You cannot approach a regulation, or this commission, I don't feel, can approach a regulation, without looking at what the worst case scenario could be. That's what that line is trying to get at. It provides a traffic analysis that proposes the worst case scenario. And that's what it should be valued at. That's what it should be presented to the commission as. Under additional materials, I want to add a subcategory under 4C IV. Basically, because the intent of the SCZ is to provide a path for large-scale anchor type projects. Noise impact analysis and the photometric lighting study should be a requirement by right of the application. They have significant impact. You can't judge the merits of the application without it. So it adds new subcategories. D, in noise impact analysis meeting requirements of section 415 of 2.01. And E, a photometric lighting study to provide confirmation that the proposed site lighting concept satisfies the requirements of section 1215.09 C. And both of those are other reference standards in the application, just that define what those requirements should be, as referenced elsewhere. Then we get on to the next number of items. The last on that page is just striking the proactive application process. And it carries through to the next page as the proactive application process goes away. So I'm just going to go along. Then we get on to page 6, which is another big clarifying point that I think or that I propose we try to look into. 1215.7 permitted uses. Now, it goes into recognizing the importance of matching the proposed development of the SDZ to the specific context of the intended district. The commission understands there must be certain flexibility to the specific uses proposed, and that it lists a number of included uses. Retail establishments, for some reason, is given a maximum area. It sets a limit to a maximum allowed area in the SDZ. None of the other uses, including all of the high intensity ones, are given a size limit for what might be appropriate for a town of this size and for a town of this infrastructure. Which is why we got a 1.5 million square foot proposed, and why we may get others in the future. I think it would be, you've gone ahead and provided a maximum project size for one establishment. I'm proposing you look at others and provide a maximum cap for many of the other intense uses, such as, actually, you could do it for all of them, to be honest with you, but light manufacturing, honestly, research and development laboratories should probably be captured in that, indoor storage and warehousing in particular. Indoor recreation and event facilities, those could all be high intensity uses. They should have a limitation on size so that we don't have something completely inappropriate proposed like we just did. So there are the following comments, 1 through 4 on that page are just essentially the same incursion, the same insertion at the end of that line. So for example, 12 indoor recreation degree, indoor recreation of no more than blank square feet. And I think that's a discussion that I'm proposing the commission start to evaluate in more depth. I don't want to assume what your needs are. I don't want to set those limits arbitrarily. I think it takes some effort and discussion. But if you look at like warehousing, because we just did it and we're talking about it a lot, the largest FedEx is the largest thing in town. That's it. The primary building, I think, is like 189,000 square feet. Things like that would be a reasonable baseline assumption for starting to set a limit. Look at what is supported in town and what is kind of considered by many as the maximum use allowed. So that's what that page does. Page 7. Design considerations, 1215.9, site bulk standards. So another concern related to the SDZ, and I understand the desire to allow for some flexibility in what is proposed, but the maximum height and area requirements are significantly increased over any other comparable zone in this county. There is nothing in our regulation that has a height greater than 45 feet, or a combined building or lot coverage of 50%, of greater than 50%. This allows for a 65-foot tall building, lot coverage up to, I forget what the exact number is, 65% of the total site area. So the next sections modifications 1 through 4 on this page change some of those limitations back to be in line with some of the regulations. And again, we can discuss the merits of that further, but my proposal is to bring those requirements in line with the rest of the regulation and not to have something as excessively large and generous. So insert number 1 changes the maximum height to 45 feet. Insert number 2, maximum building coverage to 25%. Impervious surface, the next line, item C, maximum impervious surface coverage shall be 25% of the total site area. And then I add and be inclusive of all buildings and pavement on site. So we're basically looking for 25% building, 25% lot coverage for a total of 50. That's what I'm proposing as design considerations for lot and bulk standards. Item H, the next page. I'm striking this because this is the exception that allows for additional heights. And again, it's another step beyond what we just changed to make more narrow. So we struck it in full. H1, 2, and 3. The other item on that page goes down to low impact development. Copy here, bear with me. So this seeks to add an additional subheading to low impact development. And I know low impact development is about water treatment and water management standards. But in the interest of, or in the context of trying to get something that's more appropriate for the town, it seeks to add a subcategory that for low impact development that says development of a part, or item 4, the development of a parcel of land with facilities in coordinated and harmonious fashion such that they are generally compatible with the low density residential rural character of the town and Wellington is strongly encouraged. It just seeks to capture an expanded interpretation of low impact development that supports a careful integration of proposed projects within the underlying character of Wellington, which I feel would be a reasonable request. But we're on page 9, just to try to shrink through this. It just adds another most intense use interpretation requirement at the end of the parking demand. So Item DA, it adds, it's just a text addition that says the demand should be calculated for the most stringent interpretation of the proposed use for the project. Again, it's just trying to look at what can be the worst case scenario, and that's what the calculation should be applied for. We talked about how the modifier, I mentioned a little bit earlier about 12, 15, 10, there are no changes on this page, but that the modifications are not, the modification requirements that would trigger, a start over of the process are not very different from what was done. And then moving on to the last page, it just says a couple of comments. Advance strikes the flow chart for the proactive application process. And then it tries to provide clarity for the graphic for the words concept and schematic and level of design intent again. So on that little green arrow at the top, it strikes the word concept plan. It just says 70% design plan. 70% design is just not a concept level plan. It can be confusing. It can allow for a lesser degree of requirement than what we're looking for. And then in the light blue, it says a review of, it strikes the word concept again. Let's give it a change. I forget. I apologize. Or yes, it adds a 70% design plan instead of concept plan, because that's what you're looking to do. I will make one additional comments related to this. I can't remember if I addressed it already, but there is, there was a stated goal in here of, if I can find it again. Where is the weed stuff? So what this, another thing that this regulation does, and it's in here, and I didn't propose a change to it, but I just want the commission to be aware of it, because I am also an accredited professional.
12.15.9, section D.
Thank you very much. Aha, here we go. So a lot of the discussion saying this was trying to promote, sustainability, low impact design standards and sustainability. And it gives a 5% increase in allowable lot coverage as a part of that requirement. If it pursues LEED certification. So I'm going to be honest with you, LEED certification is a fairly intensive process from both a design standpoint, but also from an upfront cost standpoint. A 5% increase really isn't going to get you there, particularly on some of the use groups that you're going to look at. For example, an ad service for design to get somebody LEED silver certification. If you run anywhere from like $100,000 to $200,000 in design professional time for a building of say 20 or 30,000 square feet, depending on the use. A 1.5 million square foot warehouse is never going to pursue that because the upfront cost of implementing that is just going to be too cost prohibitive. That is a low, you're not going to get those types of projects to follow that with that incentive. I'm not saying we need to increase that incentive because I think it'll allow, I mean, it might be nice, but I think it's just a consideration that this commission should look at because I don't think that buffer is going to get to the intent of what you're trying to do there. All right, so that is the first, sorry, I'm going on. That was the first really big part of that was changes to the SDC. The other part is a desire to define warehouse use in the regulation. So the definition of warehouse or the need to define warehouse use is not a unique concern to this town. It didn't start with PZ 2210. Other towns in Connecticut are going through the same process. They're fighting warehouses. They're creating moratorium on warehouses. They're trying to seek further definitions of warehouse use because the definition of warehouse use has evolved over the last 10 or 15 years with the development of logistics and online shopping, Amazon, like final mile. And the uses have changed, the impact has changed significantly. So what this seeks to do is, it seeks to just provide some clarity and to give some further backup to the town, to the town's interest in effectively limiting inappropriate development. So. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my page because I had a printing error here. So we can look at, you know, like I said, it's not unique. Like I know Newton, Connecticut is seeking moratorium on warehouse use currently, so that they can provide clarity on the definition. They're going through the same process now. They've started, I don't know if they've started a public hearing, I can't remember, but it's recent, it's active. They are researching it currently. Now, I'm aware that there are probably numerous ways to approach the integration throughout this ordinance, but at a minimum, I feel like I'd ask this commission to consider that the regulation should differentiate between a warehouse storage use or uses, and then distribution and logistic uses. And I think you can further break down the distribution of logistics uses into subcategories that conglomerate uses of that are similar in intensity. And then you can break those down, what would be allowable on what size. I think you can further define those limits throughout the ordinance. That gives a little bit of reasoning. And I think referencing a standard like the Institute of Traffic Engineers, you know, land use codes, 150, 157 are warehouses. You can look at those for, you know, the intensity. I think that would be a good start, but I think it should capture it. You know, we can look at other towns like Monroe. They have storage uses defined in there. The way, for example, Monroe, Connecticut, they have storage uses defined. So it's commercial warehousing contained within a fully enclosed building. When they have self-storage warehousing, then they have storage of carnival rides, which I'm less concerned about. But you know, it's again, there's a lot of variety that can happen here. But then they do wholesale and distribution centers, not including automobiles or boats. You know, so and all of those are limited again to industrial zones, just a consideration. Brookfield, Connecticut, for example, again, it's limited by special permit just in the industrial zones. And they break down warehousing and distribution and wholesale and then a whole list of separate storage uses. You know, it's not uncommon, there are ways to do it. South Windsor, again, has a number of wholesale, warehouse, and distribution center uses specifically identified. Again, they're all special permanent industrial uses. There's a trend here. So I'll leave that discussion. I think there's a lot of back and forth. I'd love to hear I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear the community's comments, but just a few items to wrap up. Again, if I'd be happy, I know this can be a little hard to follow the way it was unfortunately presented. I'm happy to provide a clean version of this. If Mr. Romano can provide, you know, the native text file, it would be my pleasure. I'm happy to revise this as we go. I would ask, and I did this at the last meeting when it was as part of my request to continue the opening of this public hearing to today, because of the need for due consideration and the potential and potentially complex impact of the zoning regulation at large by many of the ideas and questions raised with this application, I would ask the PZC again to consider proposing a text amendment as efficiently as possible without delay for the following: a moratorium on applications utilizing section 1215 to the SDZ, and a moratorium on new warehouse construction within Willington. And those moratoriums, if you're willing to consider it, would allow for the appropriate time for this commission and this town to adequately evaluate, study, and get public input on the application. You know, so that the commission can get any input they need to consider further evaluation on your own accord. I'm well aware this may not be the perfect version of this. You guys may not like some of it. You may love it. I don't know. I hope you love it. I hope you like parts of it at least. But there's a lot here, and you guys hopefully will want to take this to the next step. So I think there needs to be a pause to allow for that discussion to happen, given what, you know, the anxiety, I guess, in general about this town on, you know, inappropriate development, like we just went through for the public hearing for the last couple of months. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but as a tangent kind of notion, I would also suggest, since a lot of the focus of the SDC seems to be on deriving from Economic Development Commission interest in developing the West Willington area of town. It might be an interesting conversation point or a topic that the PZC would pursue to consider the definition and adoption of regulations that define a West Willington development zone and the appropriate uses and scale allowed within that. That would be in line with the stated goals of plan of conservation and development. Again, it's not specific to this application, but I think it is relevant to how some of it may be enacted. So the SDC is written, for example, it without check can allow for the creation of a second industrial zone in town in the West Willington corridor, which is not the intent, which is clearly not the intent or any of the goals stated in the plan of conservation and development. It was never intended that way. The SCZ would allow it, but just by a different name. It's a horse of different color, essentially. And that's reinforced again, and I know it's brought up at the hearing, but the November 2015 market study of Willington's business zones prepared by Fairweather Consulting. The Town of Willington Economic Development Commission makes note of that specifically. They identify West Willington as an area for smaller mixed uses such as specialty retail and housing, not industrial. That map used in that report is the exact one that carried over to the Plan of Conservation and Development in 2018 that changes it to business use, which I believe was, I hope I wasn't here in that time, but I assume was the intent. It was meant to be, a mixed small business type area, not a 1.5 million square foot, industrial zone. So with that, I'm going to stop talking now, but thank you again very much to all of you for the consideration. Again, I'm here for any questions by all. I'm happy to discuss any follow-up at additional meetings as needed, because I know we've gone on a bit now, but that's it. Questions? Take a trickle.
Got a question, Bob?
No, I've got a question. Insofar as making the changes you're proposing in this, I'd rather leave it the way it is and just have the changes noted. I think it's better to leave it that way so things don't get blended. So it's easier to find
Oh, I get it.
what the changes are.
I could do that as an annotated version, I guess is what I'm saying, that highlights the insertions or actually pulls it off to the side so that you can see it a little bit more clear. I'm just offering it. We don't have to-
I just think that the way it's set up, if you read this, it's easy enough to turn over and just see what your comments are.
Perfect.
I mean, that works for me.
Me too. I get the defining a warehouse. That makes a lot of sense to me. That piece, what is a warehouse versus logistics center versus, spelling those out. I get, coming up with maybe ways to limit the square footage or so forth of building height, things like that, the amount of, property covered. Yeah, I see a lot of strikeouts on the SDC. It kind of guts a lot of it. Is why not get rid of it altogether?
Yeah.
That
That was my comment, Walter. I mean, we've had very little time to discuss what happened, over the last couple of months with the public hearing. And this was a brand new regulation. And shortly after the ink was barely dry, we get hit with this 1.5 million square foot warehouse that had significant negative impacts to the environment, even though it was close by the highway. And I'm just wondering if it's if there's any merit to having it at all at this point. There's so much wrong with it.
Well, what was flawed with that process? Why would it be any different with a traditional zone change?
Exactly.
I don't really see anything flawed. It was we had to accept the application, which we did. We had an extensive public hearing, and then we essentially, based on the merits of the application and the plan of conservation development and due consideration, we denied it. Why was that? forward.
Well, I think because the fact that the developers did not have to provide all of these plans, and they were basically saying, hey, just vote for the voting, go ahead with the zoning change, and we'll provide this stuff later. Which
Well,
if you we didn't do that, but it doesn't
Did we
mean,
have enough to make an informed decision? Did we need more information? I didn't need more information.
I think one of the things that would have helped in that process, and again, you know, we're looking at a gorilla that came to town. I would have, before something like that happens, I would like to have an environmental review to better understand what the consequences of drawing 30 or 40,000 gallons of water out of the ground in proximity.
Or like runoff, you know.
Or runoff,
vast
I mean.
amounts of-
Yeah, I mean-
Water, you're gonna have that much more, you're gonna have that much wastewater. And nobody lets you use treated wastewater, even if it's drinkable. You have to discharge it and get rid of it, which is, it's nuts. But the state's not going down that road yet. So, I mean, there are flaws. I mean, like I said, I would have loved to have been able to have an environmental review to better understand, you know, how tearing up and
I think-
creating that space up would affect the town.
But you wouldn't, because they only had to present a 30%.
Exactly.
Level of detail.
Exactly.
They basically took a box and shoved it on a big piece of property, you know, a piece of property, and here, look at this,
Right.
and,
I mean, the one thing I think that the SDZ gave us, but only because it was, they were looking for a zone change up front, was that it gave us the opportunity to see what was proposed up front. And it gave us 2 opportunities to reject as opposed to 1. If they were just coming in, right? For a special permit. Unless I misread everything, I don't know what the chuckles are about.
No, you do through if the proactive application process is being utilized. The problem with that is once you've approved through the zone, you know, if you've approved it during stage 1, you know, I having experienced it, the entirety of this town is on tiptoes about being sued. You know, it becomes a much, you put both the commission and the town at risk of liability. Say you can prove that it's appropriate. Now, if you come back after making them spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in due diligence, and you tell them, now we changed our mind, that's going to be harder to, you know, harder to fight. So again, it just, that's why I focused on the proactive application process initially. Just get the due diligence up front and then make a fair hearing about it.
But you only get 1 shot. And it's at a higher level of development, which you're more prone to have legal action. I think, you know, morphing this in some way to give us 2 opportunities to reject an application is in our favor. I understand, and you're making great points about what could be improved, but I think you also have to take into consideration, isn't 2 opportunities to say no better than just 1?
Potentially, I mean, but to that degree, why not do it at 70% in final approval? As opposed to, you know,
Well, I mean-
I offer that as a, you know, as a counter suggestion. Because 30% is
I'm
just
not saying,
too low.
I'm engaging in this conversation about, you know, if we want 2 opportunities, and the 2 opportunity option seems to be better in my mind, because the first one has less chances of legal ramifications as opposed to the special permit. So, you know, I think you've made good points, but I think the SDZ also has a good point that might be we might be able to talk around this and massage it, so it continues to give us that second opportunity.
I am all for more oversight. So
I almost see it, you still having two opportunities. You have the opportunity to change the zone. This only sounds like this is just changing the zone. Then they have to come for special permit to actually do their construction and everything. So wouldn't that still be another chance to say?
What happens if the
Or
zone,
I
what
mean-
happens if the zone is already changed and they've come in to want to build? All they need is a special permit. If you don't have the SDZ. Am I right, Mike, in that sense?
So under the, if the SDZ goes away with before the SDZ, like I was trying to think back, since I've been here, we had 8 Tallinn Turnpike, 25 Mahaliak, and River Road, we had Gow, have a zone change around the corner there by the Mansfield line. So what we get is a zone change application. We don't get a site plan, we don't get any of those things. So that process still exists, and is not affected by anything that we do here. This process is outside of that, and if they opt for the proactive process, there's a lower level of design up front, but a higher level of review at the end. If they go traditional, they do more design up front, but the last step, if we had gone traditional for this process and it had been approved, they would have come in, if it approved based upon submitted 70% plans, but the final plan set, there would not have been a public hearing for, no special permit, it's a site plan. So you don't, they get to choose when they want the public input. There's no changing of the process. They don't get to skip any criteria and they don't get to skip a hearing. They just decide when they want to deal with it. So if the proactive process goes away, you have a traditional special development district process, which is the other option. But again, that's not a traditional zone. It's a special development district. But even if this is removed, someone could show up tomorrow and seek a zone change to DC or DI on that parcel or anything else. They could provide us with a narrative, no site plan, no concept, no anything, no use, and still get that zone change with next to no information. And that's just going based upon what we've received in the past. You can require it, but they're going to say to you, we don't have it all done because we don't even know if we have the zone change.
You know, it's not-
So if this commission wants to move in a direction of requiring all of the sites to be fully engineered at the zone change level, you could certainly do that. But in the case of the last one we had, which was 25 Mahaliak, you would have required that guy to have his addition fully engineered and prepared, 100% level for a zone change. And the setbacks are different by zone, so if that doesn't work, then the setbacks would change, and so there's a lot of variables there. I don't know if that answers your question. It's probably longer than it should have.
Where are the regulations for the zone change? Because I looked for those and I couldn't find them.
What do you mean by regulation?
I mean, what is the, where does it, where is the, I know we've been through them, because I've sat here and listened, but where do they live? I couldn't find them in the state statutes. I couldn't find anything that talked about where the regulate,
Right.
how do you apply for a zone
So-
change?
So there is.
Where is that written? Is it written anywhere?
There's stuff there, language that speaks to zone changes, the traditional zone change
Where?
in the zoning regs.
You know where?
I could find it for you.
Okay. 'Cause I
But
looked and I
this,
couldn't
but
find it.
this is a special development district. It's
Right.
still inherently different.
Okay.
So it's.
I was looking for a
It's
traditional,
not in
because I
there.
know we've done them. I just couldn't find it.
It's an old book.
When you get a chance. Point it out.
No, I could.
They can have the STZ in there.
But again, I mean, the advantage of, and I would, if I may, I mean, the advantage of the commission's purview as a part of any zone changes, request any available information they so desire at the time. You're not requiring it of every application, but if somebody were to say propose an industrial use in R80 zone over 150 acres, yes, you're going to ask for a site plan. Yes, you're going to ask for additional information before approving the zone, and you have that purview already. But to just approve the proactive application gives you're approving appropriateness in the town. You're saying, yes, you can provide this project here with with next to no due diligence. It's failure by design, despite, lofty goals.
Would it be better to tighten up the proactive approach to give it closer, not quite traditional, but closer to the traditional, but not so tight that it's going to discourage either? And what would be the reasoning for not, say, in the application, say in the proactive, we want 50%. So there's only that 20% traditional. As a developer, well, why don't I go the traditional route? Because I'm gonna, what's 20%? Can I, you know, those types of numbers, you get them close enough that it's more of a, instead of being so open as you see it here, maybe we tighten it up. The proactive and leave it in, but tighten it down. So they're running parallel instead of on two different total locations.
Again, I mean, the easier approach might just be to, if the second approval, maybe there's two public hearings for the standard case. Again, guys, the SDZ is a request for special consideration for something that doesn't fit an underlying zone. Like it's all great that you're trying to encourage it, but it's a request for special consideration. It's falls outside of, the appropriate native use of the zone. And it just, in my eyes, it shouldn't be relegated to just, a free for all.
It's just, I think about the landowner. Just this one for the warehouse. Somebody was paying taxes on that land since, I don't know, since the town was incorporated. Somebody had been owning that land for a long time. They finally found a buyer. They were hoping to turn a profit on that. There's large parcels of land left in town that are not conducive to residential development. What is the landowner to do? I mean, we could certainly regulate ourselves so we won't have any business here. I mean, that is, and if that's what, that can be whatever, and nobody wants the house next to there. I don't want the 5 houses going next to me, but I can't stop it. I can't protest. I can't say it's an inappropriate use here. They cut down all the trees. All the trees are gone. I wish that hadn't happened, but it happened. Nothing I can do.
You're giving the owner the flexibility to pursue this approach just by its creation. It doesn't need to be so low level that, it's.
But is somebody gonna say, I'm gonna do a 75%, a 70% design before I even know if I can buy the property? I mean, the developers haven't bought the property yet.
This commission can have a formal discussion with the developer anytime. We did so at the last meeting.
I know. I'm just really thinking of these landowners that remain in town. And they, sometimes this is their legacy. They want to sell it to the highest bidder. And if somebody says, well, geez, you gotta do 70% design before I can even know whether or not I can do it. We are limiting growth. That's the intent. I mean, but that is.
I mean, but you are, so.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just throwing it out.
I guess my argument, it's a degree of intensity, right? So, you don't necessarily go from 0 to, 120 for 1.5 million in what's allowed.
But we didn't do that. I mean, we didn't even come close to doing it. And there was no pressure to do it. I didn't feel any pressure to make any decision other than on the merits of the application. There was no coercion. There's a lot of animosity from the public. I mean, like, why would you even consider this? It's like, well, because we have to. That's what we do.
And I commend you guys for doing.
And you listen to everything, and I don't know, whatever. So it seems to me that the decision was made based on the information provided, and public hearings like that are always contentious, but that's what kind of makes the job fun. But I didn't really see it as an inadequacy. I admit that this, if you remember when we did our open space development, we actually did a test case. We deliberated for 6 months on I can't even think what we call it anymore, because so long as we didn't develop a subdivision. But we actually had someone submit an application and we tested it, and then we found the flaws in that application. We had an engineer brought in an application. We did, played it up against there, found out what was wrong with it, fixed the holes. It was kind of a good thing to do. This was our first crash test, and maybe we saw a few flaws in it, but.
And we never built an open space.
We never did know that's an open space something. Yeah, we never did. But we tested the concept, and we tested it this time. Basically, I don't know. I could see that it's a little confusing, but they provided a whole bunch of information, which
made it sound like it didn't fit the plan of conservation and development, and it was declined, so.
Well, there was a whole, I mean, there was a whole hubbub about open space subdivision.
Yeah, there was.
Basically, the residents were saying, what are you gonna try to do, turn Willington into Manchester?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But it had, you know, once you get into it,
Right.
it had its merits.
Mhm.
And I agree, but nobody's ever taken the bait and built one yet.
No, right,
No.
but I think now we have parcels where they are, I mean, really, most of the town is R80. I mean, if you're gonna build, you pretty much gotta change something from R80 into a commercial zone, there's no way around that, because the whole town was R80, so that's not gonna change, it's always gonna be a zone change, and then some sort of a build. Unless you're building on stuff that's already converted to commercial, which isn't that much, so.
Loves came along before the SDC.
What's that?
Loves came along before the SDC.
Yeah, right.
Can I just clarify a couple of things? One of the questions brought up was related to what was submitted to CROG. So I've got the email here. The document that was submitted to CROG is the same document that went to hearing that the PZC talked about at their February 19th meeting.
Is that available to be posted?
It's online.
It's
The
not according to the meeting minutes.
The document that's in the February 22nd, the February 19th.
Correct. I want, like, I guess what I'm saying is the document that was submitted to CROG was approved on 1/18. There were changes that made based on your discussion on at the Economic Development Commission after that fact.
So what
Prior
are
to
you
CROG
looking
approval.
for?
I'm looking for the draft that was provided to the commission on 1/18 that was approved to go to CROG, which is not uploaded to the files because it was an earlier draft that I believe, based on the discussion, didn't have the product application process. That's the merit.
Your statement was that the application that went to CROG did not have the proactive process.
I would like
That's
to
the only
verify
thing
that.
so what I'm clarifying right now is that the document that was sent to CROG had the proactive application process. I have the email. I can forward it to you. I can PDF it. I can take a photo.
I'm happy to, yeah, please upload
So-
it to the, or send it to me.
I don't know that CROG keeps copies of everything they review, but I'm happy to reach out to them.
Well,
and-
don't, we have copies of everything you submitted on as a part of the permit portal on.
Yep,
the site.
it's there.
So can we go to the 1/18, application that was sent to CROG and just.
It's
pull that
based
document?
upon the application, so it's all attachments, but it's in there. It says draft for hearing. That's the same document that went to CROG. Draft for hearing.
Okay,
The same file name it's online. and
I
it's
get
exactly-
there are multiple versions of that. There's a slightly different amended version, at the 3.1 meeting, the 3.
Well, it was a working draft. It was reviewed on the fly. The commission made comments. We made edits. We workshopped it again.
Yeah, again, I'd like to see the draft that was submitted to CROG. I think it's a relevant point because I do believe that changes were made after the approval, after the version of the document that was submitted, that was reviewed by this commission and approved to send to CROG. Based on the language, and if you go back and watch your meeting minutes or read your meeting minutes and watch the meetings, and then follow the EDC commission meeting on 2/9. Changes were made after that approval.
So the document goes to CROG before a public hearing. So it was workshopped by the EDC, reviewed by the commission. They thought it was ready to go. We submitted to CROG, scheduled a public hearing. We're not prevented from, the commission's not prevented from making changes to the document.
I'm
once
not
it goes
saying
to
they
CROG.
are. I'm just, my only point for raising this was that, well, there were 2 points actually. One is that earlier versions of this document did not have a proactive application process. It wasn't the initial thought process for this, and it wasn't part of the initial discussions that you had and you talked about with the commission on 1/4 and 1/18. 2, that changes were made after outside consultation with industry contacts. While we had outside developers for like a 1.5 million square foot warehouse interested in this, in discussing informally with you and other members of this town. So I question whether or not this SDZ regulation was created to allow an easy pathway for a specific developer without their actual application or merit. They didn't come before the board with this, with a text amendment trying to create this zone. We did. I'm just asking for clarity on what was submitted to CROG and what that timeline was.
I'm happy to forward it to you, but the SDZ was envisioned and originally by the EDC.
I get that.
So it wasn't, it had nothing to do with any specific property. And I've said it multiple times, at multiple locations and via email here, there and everywhere. For the purposes of this application, and you use the term gorilla, and I know we have to separate ourselves in some way, or at least my suggestion to you is from the 1.5 million square foot building for two reasons. One, the SDZ is a lot more than that.
Oh, yeah.
And two, that project was coming for a zone change no matter what. The months and months leading up to, prior to, we have received calls on multiple parcels in town about various uses, all of which are large. And it's based upon the fact that we have large parcels along a highway. We're one of a very few communities. So these large footprints were coming regardless. The SDZ going away entirely does not prevent that from happening. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres already zoned industrial. The SDZ, there's no connection there. The reason why this is written the way that it was in the discussions that we've had, is because if we had just mirror our traditional zones that we have with coverage and height and all those other things, there's no point to the SDZ. We tried to create incentive because it required a higher level of design. We don't have LID standards in our regs now. We don't have a lot of design standards. So by creating a special development district, we have a far more control over how a building looks, how it's designed, the overall layout of the site. That was the intent of the SDZ.
But it doesn't get there. It doesn't ask for any of that. It's particularly as part of the proactive application process.
Because as part of the proactive application process, the idea is to require more information than what a traditional zone change would require and has been submitted historically so that the commission can get a sense of what the use is, because this is unique, but not requiring the building to be fully engineered because they have complete discretion over what they want. They could say, we're going to deny the application because the sky is green. And that doesn't subject us to a lawsuit because of the way the special development district is written.
So you keep saying it says a higher level of due diligence, but this commission can ask as a part of the zone change for any level of due diligence requires. And for a project of the impact and significance of this, of what's trying to be entertained by this SDZ regulation, you have to, they would, it's inherent by what the requirement is. Somebody comes with a 1.5 million square foot warehouse, and again, it's the case study would help. What if it's a 200,000 square foot retail mixed use structure? They're gonna want to see that.
But you can't assume that we know the size of the building when the zone change happens traditionally. They're gonna say, we would like to have a zone change. When we did Gauss site zone change, we didn't know the density. We don't know, but they're gonna tell you, you're assuming that if we ask, we're gonna be given that precise information. And that if they say, well, we want, if we had done this traditionally and the commission had asked for information on the building size and they had said 500,000 square feet and they had approved it, they're not then bound to that. They're not, you can't go back to the zone change application and say, well, you told us 500,000 square feet and that's why we approved it. So you're limited there. The commission can't do that at the special permit phase if they meet the criteria of coverage and setbacks and height and everything else. But by requiring the concept plan, you're asking them to put a portion of their efforts into doing site design to demonstrate feasibility without doing so much design that they're engineering the whole site too far in advance.
But you're saying that it could, but then again, it's that proactive application process, that 30% level of design. It could be that 1.5 million square foot warehouse could have been one tenant, multiple tenants. You're approving appropriateness based on no due diligence. The site design could have changed. The complete access to the site, that 30% level of design that was presented is irrelevant because it's a concept level plan. It has no bearing. You're approving something that
It does have bearing because there's only certain changes that they can make from the concept level to the special permit. So if it goes from one use to 5, if it goes from warehouse to something else, if the parking doubles, all of that stuff negates their approval. The SDZ is written that way. So they can't, there's no bait and switch that can occur. And under a traditional zone change process without this SDZ, the zone change, like with Love's, how long ago did that happen before it was built? It doesn't expire. This gives them 1 year to build exactly what they said, or it goes away.
Well, they're not building anything. It gives them 1 year to come to you with the final plan that matches the concept outlined within the thing.
So in the case of Love's, it would have died because they didn't come back. They didn't get it. They didn't have their engineering. They didn't have their DEEP. They didn't have OSTA. So Love's would have died and that would have been it. Because but the traditional path that exists outside of this, it puts that forever. They file it on the land records, the zone changes is there, and there's nothing that the
But
commission can
again,
do.
if the change requirements are so limited that, any change of any minor significance triggers a restart, why even have the application process and have them do that due diligence? Because it's not going to change. Provide the due diligence up front as part of the standard application process at a 70% level of design.
The original intent of the proactive process was to provide a tangible approval for a developer or property owner to be able to then go to a tenant or user and say, I have a tangible endorsement from the town. I can tell you that they are at the concept level endorsing this use on this property at approximately this scale. Because most tenants now, that's what they want. They don't want to say, yeah, we're going to sink a couple $100,000 into crossing our fingers. So to be able to land someone that's going to spend money in an area like Willington, where we have no utilities, so you have significant development costs outside of South Windsor and Manchester and East Hartford and all these other places, we wanted to provide them with something where we knew what they were doing, they knew what they were getting, but didn't have to go further down the road than what was required to determine what might be acceptable.
Again, it's promoting the overall interest of the residents of this town.
Assuming that the person developing the property isn't the property owner. Again, PZ 2210 was someone from Texas or wherever they were. But you're making the assumption that a property owner would not use the SDC to develop their own property. So, and that property owner could live here.
They could. Same, it's the same. Again, it's almost an irrelevant point. Again, it's not a one-stop. It's not open season, or at least the intent should be open season. You're not necessarily required to accommodate all possible conditions and all, this regulates use. It's all purpose. Is to provide reasonable regulation for a town of this size. And this, yes, I understand the desire to promote economic development to try to bring in business. You can't do that at the expense of potential, at the expense of the town, especially over the, for the benefit of an outside developer. If it can happen for an outside developer, it will happen. And it's going to be taken advantage of time and time again for pointless applications for things that don't fall in line with the plan for conservation and development. And hopefully this commission represented it this one time, that, you did an admirable job. That's not to say that will always be the case. That's not to say somebody, will have a different application. It's too open-ended. The regulation is too light on requirements. It is completely unsatisfactory. And that's the argument between this. And again, that's my opinion. I think from the initial conversation we're having here, I think this commission understands that there is a tightening up that needs to happen. I think there are benefits to this, which is why I didn't say let's just strike 1215 altogether. I think there are advantages to this, to having this regulation in place. I just think the application process is completely inappropriate. And I think honestly, it's, the traditional application does certain things that are beneficial. But yeah, so thank you for the discussion. I appreciate it.
Further comments, questions?
Well, I agree. If we're going to keep this, we definitely have to incorporate max limits. There was that, I think he was a planner from Ashford, he basically was saying, with the town, with our challenges as far as not having public water and sewer, no project would ever be even accepted above 400,000 square feet. So I think James said FedEx was 187. I think I looked it up as 220,000 square feet, but it just kind of gives you an order of magnitude of what kind of businesses we want to have. Per our POCD, they say, the area along the 84 corridor is feasible. But like I said, the public brought up a lot of good points of the impacts to the environment. So if somebody came in with an application tomorrow with a 1 million square foot warehouse, where would we go? Would we have to go through this whole 2-month process all over again? Or do we just say, no, it's not going to be acceptable because it doesn't meet our town as far as the services we can provide?
Well, there's nothing there right now, Doug, saying that they can't put in an application for that.
I know. I know.
Well, yes, they could. And we'd have to go through the whole process, and that's just part of the fun. Part of the job, Doug, at this point.
Well, that was my earlier comment. I mean, if we basically, is it worth even having this this STZ zone right now, the way it is?
Well, to Mike's point, they can do it with our traditional process. They'd come in for the zone change, some of the loves years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You'd ask a lot of questions about what's going there, but that's, the whole point of this was, there was a feeling that it's 70% when we hit that, discouraged a lot of these people from even taking step one.
Well, I recall, yeah, I mean, I recall when it was proposed, and it was more like the scale or the size of the Dollar General, because that landowner.
Smaller places, microbreweries.
Yeah.
I never wrapped my head around that coming out there.
Right out of the gate.
Out of the gate.
Yeah.
But it did. And, we had all the hearings and listened to the public and asked a lot of questions, gave the developer their chance. So, that's just part of the deal.
Mhm.
To sit through that, once somebody does that, it's the whole purpose of a public hearing.
Oh, I understand, but I'm just saying, it's like, well, what do we want? Is there something that we should be doing now? Should we be putting a moratorium on this STZ? Or to give us time to revise it, to incorporate some of these points that were brought up? Or just kind of proceed with James's application with modifying it, and it'll take however long it takes.
Can you do both concurrently? Like, do a moratorium, but still discuss the merits? I mean, that's the whole point. My application went in early specifically to get you guys started, without having to wait for PZ 2210 to wrap before you could start the whole lengthy statutory requirement period. So that one, we can get a jump start on, effectively doing something about this promptly, rather than waiting 3 months and having 3 months of more of this to go through.
So I'm just thinking out loud here, Mike. What would a moratorium actually prevent? Somebody coming forward, like, it might prevent somebody from moving forward because of the 30%
On the
versus
STZ?
70. Yeah.
It would prevent a new application under the STZ, but it wouldn't prevent
A traditional application.
traditional
Still do that.
So one of the things that we are talking a lot about, or I'm hearing about, is building size and appropriateness of building size. So we could, and I think that we talked about it, and it's in one of these where there's a space for the commission to essentially figure out what they feel might be appropriate for certain types of uses. But it's happened in other towns. You set a limit of 200,000 square feet, and you end up with 3 pad sites of 200,000 square feet each. When you have hundreds of acres, it's not as hard to do. Generally speaking, I think that multiple small buildings would generate more traffic than one large building the same size. So if that is a concern of the commissions, we'd need to beef up the language to go beyond a square foot cap and just say, we've arbitrarily set it at 290,000 square feet because of XYZ, and really speak to total building coverage, period. So you can have a building of a maximum square footage of whatever you decide, plus any number of buildings, or the total aggregate building size on the parcel can't exceed X, so that they couldn't develop 3 100,000 square foot buildings or 5 100,000 square foot buildings. Not that they probably would, but I know it's been proposed in other towns. So we could do that. That would not be hard to do, to limit the aggregate size of buildings. We could add some language on definitions. If there was a need for clarity, there's some industry standard documents that we could pull from. There's some other things that we-
As far as the heights of our building, what's the maximum height our fire trucks can reach?
I don't,
In-town apparatus trucks can have 35-foot ladders, so 20-something foot building. We do have access through mutual aid to a couple of 100-foot towers, but then you have to also incorporate, that's 100 straight up. They don't go straight up, so you're
Mhm.
really looking somewhere lower. We do have access to them, but again, you also need the area to supply them and the water. They do not come with their own water. They have to have another truck either through the town or somewhere that supplies that truck with the water. And every foot of 5-inch hose that is laid down is a gallon of water. So if you have to supply, and there is enough hose in town to supply almost a mile to get to wherever you need water, but that requires multiple trucks along the line, and you tend to strip the area, surrounding areas.
Okay. Because I think stuff like that, it should be captured somewhere. I don't know if it's the POCD appendix or something like that, but we don't want to approve a building and then find out that we have to go buy a $5 million fire truck and then build a new fire station to put it in because we don't have anything big enough to house it. I mean, and those were some of the comments that brought up by the public that I'm not sure, if people were really kind of thinking, that far down the road.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, I thought that on the most recent warehouse proposal that they already had covered, the fire marshal had said.
No,
That
the
with,
fire marshal didn't. That was the chief of the South Station
Okay.
right now.
but given how the folks that were proposing that building had planned out their fire suppression, everything in town was.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
It wasn't enough. It
Well, they
wasn't enough.
gotta have sprinkler density in a building like that.
Yeah,
That would
and
ensure
that would be where you're gonna get that kind of water. if those-
Racking and everything, there's all
Yeah.
kinds of sprinkler density
Covering in a high,
required.
high capacity rack is
That's
significant.
a lot of water.
It's each storage compartment, it's multiple levels sprinkler.
So, so Mike, a question about limiting the size of the building. If someone has a 100-acre parcel, if they had the zone change and you limited them to 300,000 square feet, does that open the town up for some kind of litigation, of not allowing them to completely use their property?
So this discussion would be only applied to the SDZ. So since nobody's zoned SDZ at this point, there's nobody who's seeking to develop under this.
Okay.
If we had approved 2210, passed the modification saying, yeah, by the way, you're limited to 200,000 square feet, that would be an issue
For that.
for the applicant because they came in or something else. But this would not be an overarching limitation in the zoning areas. It would just be under the STZ. So DC, DI, R80, there's no building maximums there. They would be limited by their coverage. We have coverage requirements, obviously, and so based upon that and topography, but no generic.
This already says on it, has it for retail establishments of 30,000 feet, so it's already, you already have that
Yep.
in here. Just not across the board.
Well, it's obvious, this is gonna take a good deal of discussion.
No, it is.
This is not gonna be
This isn't gonna
totally
be a
resolved
quick
tonight.
race.
Yeah,
This is a public hearing, right?
yes.
So can we entertain, I make a motion to close the public hearing? Yes.
Without public input.
There's no public comment.
Yeah,
here. You
I
can't
think, wasn't this the
entertain-
public comment now? I'm sorry.
No, we're not.
Oh, you haven't opened it up yet?
No, it was, we were bouncing around a lot of things, so we didn't get to the public.
I thought we were in the public.
Jump the gun. All right, let's hear from the public. Go ahead. Just state your name and address the usual.
It's Ellie Lowell, 34 Elbridge Road.
Yeah.
Willington, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Just a question of inconsistencies. Under 12.15.1, Modifications which substantially alter the proposed or existing uses within the established SDZ shall require modification of the approved master plan. These include, the first two provide a percentage. Number 3 and 4 say any proposed site, for example, number 3 says any proposed site change which would decrease the amount of green space by more than 2,000 square feet. It actually gives an amount. For that 2,000 square feet, if it was a 10,000 square foot building, it would be 20%. If it was 100,000 square feet building, it would be 2%. They'd only have to do it. So it seems to me that qualifying it as a percentage would be preferable than quantifying it by a number. Square foot. That's all. It's just, the first two were percentages, the last two leave it open for the bigger the building, the less green space they have to allow. Modify. That was just.
What page was that you were
That's
looking?
Page 10.
page 10, 12,
Okay.
15, 10. And the lot size is gonna be very impactful on what percent is given back. Allows green space. Apply that to the 1.5 million square foot building that was proposed and apply that 2,000 square feet, 1,000 square feet of green space. Figure out what percentage that is. It's just a thought.
Excel 49 are also some things are worked out. So why not have like a 70% plan for larger developments based on a square footage? And maybe like a 30% for small businesses, because, you know, obviously you don't want to put a burden on small businesses that just not even apply. Personally, I don't even understand why we need the SDC. It seems like the lawsuit was the only reasoning. Why don't we just put these maximum heights of square footage for a building size or height and such like that? What James had recommended in his presentation for max height and percentage of land that can be developed and such, I think was a good starting point at least. I know the EDC had indicated in their meetings that they want to develop this town.
No, that's the purpose of an economic.
No, I know that, but their tone was like big development, not the mom and pops. I'm not saying this large, but something of bigger size that maybe many people don't want. And I know, Mike and I and Erica, the town attorney, had a meeting the other day, and it came up and Mike was stating something about an $800,000 square foot data center coming to town potentially. If that's on our tables, and I know Neil Jones has been mentioning EDC because they're looking to move out of Reedville, Mass, and they're interested in Willington because we have the rails. If those two warehouses or data centers are potentially on our radar here, why don't we put a pause on any, applications being approved over whatever square footage? So some businesses still can apply, but we're putting a hold on those larger developments in the meantime. What my comments are.
Okay, thanks. Other questions or comments from the public? Go ahead, Ralph.
Of course I have. Ralph Schultz, 47 Wilson Road. I am enthusiastically in support of a moratorium on 1215. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion that has to take place here, a lot of back and forth that has to take place here. And do you really want to wrestle with more applications under the SDZ when we don't know what the hell we really want in the SDZ? That would be stupid. I'm sorry. I think it just would be flat out stupid. There's some good points to this, but what I noticed when I followed all of the recordings for EDC meetings and PZC meetings as this section was developed, It evolved from meeting to meeting to meeting. And the problem I have with Mike's previous statement about that being a working document and not having a record of where it was at each of those stages is wrong. I'm sorry, Mike, but you should have maintained a record like that. Because it tells the story much better. Yeah, I understand the advantage of having one working document on your computer. But each time you go to make changes, save that version before you change anything. And then you can backtrack how you got here.
Can I ask a stupid question? I mean, those documents were printed and mailed to you guys. Does anybody still have a copy of that in your records?
Well, all right, I have one other comment.
Sorry. Didn't mean to step in.
The fact that this commission approved the STZ zone without one comment about the fact that there were references to other regulation sections that simply said, see section XXX. How the hell could you do that? That night, unanimously approve a section that was incomplete. That was foolhardy. I'm sorry. Put a moratorium on this chapter of the zoning regulations and let's see where we really should go for our town. We have two corridors that are a resource for women, the rail corridor and the I-84 corridor. The one hazard with the I-84 corridor, if you look carefully on the map, it also more or less parallels Roaring Brook. And Roaring Brook is a major tributary to the Willamette. So it's great that we have access to an interstate highway that can reach Boston in 90 minutes and can reach New York City in an hour and a half if you're crazy. That's a resource. But if you're going to utilize that resource, you better think carefully about how you're going to develop what's adjacent to it. You know, I'm a fan for pursuing this rail project. I think there's some merit there, but there's also an impact. And zones like this, special development zones, can be a blessing or a curse. What do we want? Be cursed, or do we want sensible development for our time? That's my take on it. But please don't close the public hearing because there's a lot more to talk about.
All right, anybody else in the room before I go look for people online?
And sorry for getting so passionate.
Ralph, all's forgiven. Get salt for them guys. All right, anyone online? Yes, Kathy Demers.
Good evening, everybody. This is Kathy Demers, 48 Mason Road. I did submit a letter today. I don't know that you would have gotten it yet, but I would like to highlight a few things. I would like to say that I do agree that there's a lot more discussion that should be held on the SDZ regs. Some of the other issues that the applicant brought up tonight, I just wanted to say I do believe that it is difficult for planning and zoning to vet an application at a 30% design concept level, particularly when you have large scale development that can significantly impact traffic patterns or alter natural resources, increased demand on resources such as our need for water, fire, police, and things that are high intensity uses, things that have as far as our zoning regulation defining high intensity uses, things that use which discharges into a subsurface disposal system 2,000 gallons or more of sanitary or industrial effluent per day. So I think it's difficult when you only have things coming in at a 30% design level to identify if those that design concept is actually consistent with the vision and the goals of the plan of conservation and development, particularly areas of conservation because at the 30% design level, we're not even requiring them to show actually, where the wetlands and the water courses are, besides what's on a town GIS map. The other thing I do agree with the applicant is that the term warehouse should be further delineated into subcategories. And I think this would facilitate the commission's review of their purpose and intensity of use. This is important, particularly when we're deciding if traffic studies are using appropriate calculations based on intensity of use. I also agree with the applicant that planning and zoning should consider adding maximum size limitations for high impact uses, which are consistent with our rural town resources and development needs. For example, size limitations could be based on square footage of a building footprint, amount of water demand, or even septic size limits. I also agree with the applicant that there needs to be a reconsideration of how terms are used in the SDZ regulations, things like concept site plan, master concept plan, preliminary concept plan. I think that these should match the intent of the review level and also be consistent throughout the regulations. As planning and zoning considers further refinement of the SDZ regulations, I hope you'll also consider requiring additional information at the zone change level related to natural resources and topography. For example, wetlands and water courses should be delineated on the site plan by a licensed soil scientist, not just by our town GIS maps, since these are not always accurate. Additionally, areas with steep slopes greater than 20%, bedrock outcrops, and any unique natural, scenic, and/or historic features of the property, I believe should be identified on the plan early in the planning stages. As Bob Shabbat mentioned earlier, it's very difficult if you don't have an environmental review done early in the process to have it done later when somebody comes in for a special permit. So I think that knowing more about the natural resources on the property are particularly important before we decide on a zone change. This will help us to be more consistent with the conservation goals in the plan of conservation and development. I also believe that the regulations regarding building coverage and paving or impervious surfaces should be more consistent with our other design development regulations. For example, building coverage should be limited to 25%. And total impervious surface areas to 50%. Also, maximum height of the building should be limited to 4 stories or less, so that it's in better alignment with our fire department resources and will also help to protect view sheds. One of the other things I think that should be included in the SDZ regulations is more specific information about buffers. We do have them in our other zoning regulations. For example, in section 5.05.0302, we require 50-foot landscape buffers between any DI zone and abutting residential zones. In those same regulations, we require access driveways and roads for DI uses to be located no less than 200 feet from any residential zone line. And 4.14 says that no building structure or parking area should be less than 50 feet from the property line of any residentially zoned parcel. We don't have this defined in the SDZ, and I feel that this is a problem in terms of when applicants are looking at coming in with any type of a concept design. And lastly, I'd like to just mention that in terms of the letter from CROG related to this text amendment, they did say that they were concerned that the changes to the town's proactive application process could conflict with policies around regional efforts to attract, retain, and expand economic opportunities, as well as policies around increasing the range of choice in housing for people of all ages and income due to the substantial increased burden on developers. My response to this might be that CROG staff have not considered that Willington will have a difficult time assessing the appropriateness of large-scale development based on only a 30% concept plan, since the town does not have adequate infrastructure, water, sewer, police, fire. As a matter of fact, in CROG's own regional plan of conservation and development, Chapter 8, under land use, its policy states that we should encourage residential, commercial, and industrial development in areas where adequate infrastructure is available. Thank you for your time and consideration. I hope you'll take this opportunity to thoroughly review and refine the SDZ regulations so that they reflect the town's development limitations. They're aligned with the vision and goals of the POCD and consistent with other zoning regulations.
Thanks, Kathy. All right, M's iPhone.
Hi, Marisa Pelletier, 227 River Road. I just wanted to say real quick that I share the sentiments of the applicant, Kathy and Ralph. There's a lot of really great points in discussion tonight, and a lot of work went into the plan of conservation. And I just feel like it would be prudent to have a moratorium while further discussion and definitions are made regarding the PZC. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Any further comments? Questions? I think we kind of need to continue this. What's the thoughts of the initiative? Yeah. Because this discussion hasn't even really begun a little bit. What's the, and we can motion for that in a minute. What's the thought about a moratorium? Since it came up as part of the public hearing.
Probably a good idea at this point, considering our experience over the last several months. I'd rather not go through that again until we have something a little more concrete.
I personally think there's some merit in the SDZ. I think I'd use a little.
I do too, but a tweak seems to be in order.
And we certainly don't want to discourage any kind of development in town, and we don't want to make it hard for any, I'm sure everybody needs a 70% concept plan to go forward.
But somebody did bring up the Ashford person who said that, that they limit, because of the lack of sewer, they limit to 400,000 square feet, things of that nature. I think that's probably a good idea to put in there.
Andy, thoughts?
Yes, I will. I think we should continue it.
Okay. So before we do that, well, what would be the process for a moratorium? Simple motion? We have to add it to the agenda on the next agenda? How?
It would, I think we talked about last time, it would track just like a text amendment. So just like we would draft any other one. So if that's what you wanted to do, I could write up some language. For a moratorium, you basically have to know what you're doing, what it's for. So basically the purpose of it, how long. So you can't just say we want to have a moratorium because we don't want applications. It has to be a moratorium related, like with cannabis. We had a moratorium to consider the adoption of. So we'd have to have a purpose statement, a time frame. I could draft one and have you guys review it at the next meeting. And then if you like it and you still feel like you're far away from making progress on this, we can refer it to CROG and schedule a hearing, et cetera, et cetera. So I could have that done for the next meeting, which would be the 18th.
Point of order, doesn't the applicant have to allow the extension of the public hearing?
You have 35 days from today.
From today, right, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we can keep it open for 35
You
days.
burned more you burned a bunch of the first 65 to get to here, but we
Get
I think it was only 12 days, but
we moved into step 2, which is the 35.
So the moratorium, what, 90 days?
Yes.
6 months.
Well, you can decide on the time frame at the meeting. I'll just draft the language and you can.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, we'll do this.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion that we continue public hearing TZ 22-13, the text amendment application pertaining to modifications of the strategic development zone of the applicant's James Marshall. Okay, you seconded, all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay. So it is continued. Yep, thank you. No new business tonight, so we have unfinished business. We have PZ 22-11. Special permit application for expansion of home occupation to add propane delivery at 163 Ruby Road. Applicant owner David Litwin. I think we need some conditions. Consider that, maybe,
So
maybe we wait till the next meeting to.
I can just go over with
Go
you,
ahead.
when we were on the property with the applicant going over everything, there's a bunch of stuff to sort of unpack and deal with, and the reason why it's confusing is because it's confusing. The fact of the matter is, and I don't want to ever speak ill of anybody, but I'm not sure why Susan originally didn't require that application to come here. Because external evidence of the business triggers special permit review. It was originally approved as a staff permit and perpetually renewed. So that's got nothing to do with the applicant. He came in and sought approval and she went out and she kept reissuing annual renewals. So the septic permit and everything related to that is not at all subject to what's here. This is just two propane trucks and a box truck. All that aside, when we were out there, we kind of went over some thoughts that I had in my head about things related to, again, the screening, and I kind of just threw things together after we met. So one, again, to clarify, the only thing that you are considering or approving is the allowance of parking 3 additional vehicles on the property. The other thing that I clarified, and he's still here, so he'll jump up and sock if I'm saying it incorrectly, but the trucks will be empty when on the property. He has no intention of filling up and parking them there full. And he explained some rationale behind that, which makes sense. So I think that could be included as a condition. And I went over that with him and we didn't have any issues with that. The issues of property ownership, I mean, his site plan or his sketch or whatever, and the regulations do provide you with flexibility on what you are willing to accept. Indicates that the property line is about 131 feet from where that driveway is. If there's still concerns about the properties not being tied together, we could add a condition that 163 and 187 are to remain in the ownership of the permittee. So if he decides to divest himself of one of the two, it's a significant change. He'd have to come back or he'd be in violation. We talked about a solid fence or gate. I wrote in here not less than 6 feet in height to be installed north of the detached garage, parallel with Ruby Road for a distance of, and you guys would have to decide, I figure somewhere at least 40 feet in length is what you're going to need to adequately cover. One of the things we could do, if you didn't want to do anything tonight, would be to have the applicant just stake where that distance is, a 40-foot linear distance, and we could go out and look and determine if we felt like that's appropriate. You can't talk to him about it, but the existing parking area to the northwest of the detached garage shall not be expanded to accommodate additional vehicles. So again, you have a spot there that was approved as part of a septic permit. You can't make that bigger. So basically what you have now is what you're working with, which again further supports the idea that everything else is not visible. Propane trucks shall remain empty. He referenced basically wanting to do an oil change, etc. But other than that, has no intention of parking anything forward of the building line. So another condition you could consider would be that there will be no overnight parking or storage of business vehicles or equipment within the existing driveway. So again, that area between the garage, I guess. I don't think that's what he's doing, but again, it alleviates concerns long-term. And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention, again, is there's a question about the ZBA requirement for a special exception related to propane distribution and storage. He's not storing and he doesn't want to bring propane on the property. So really it's just for the parking of vehicles, which is why we did not instruct him to obtain a special exception.
We're talking a few gallons of residual in the truck.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if I've captured everything, but those are the things that I reviewed with him ahead of time to make sure that if there were issues, we address them. What happened?
What's the commission feel about this one? You want to deal with it tonight, or you want to wait till the next meeting?
Let's wait.
Okay.
If this makes sense, I can prepare a formal
Yes.
motion. You can read it.
Prepare the formal motion. We'll take care of it next meeting. All right. And I know the public hearing's closed, but yeah, it's good to get all these things in there. All right,
We'll do that.
all right. That brings us to item 2. We know where that's going. The hearing was continued on PZ 2213. You'll prepare something for a potential moratorium.
Right, so that'll be unrelated to 13. It'll be
Okay,
something separate,
yes.
but I'll have that for the next.
All right. Then we have item 3, PZ 22-14. That's the text amendment application pertaining to the prohibition of cannabis establishments, section 13, applicant Willington Planning and Zoning. That going to be on our next, we're gonna talk about this tonight.
It's up to you. You have 65 days to decide, so you still have some time.
What's the commission want to do? Yeah,
It's 10 minutes to 11.
let's continue this to our next meeting.
Okay.
Is that this is going to require a little discussion, no matter which way it goes. I think we this one that.
The only thing I would say is in the interim, if there are questions or information that you're looking for,
sure.
just let me know so that we can have it.
4, affordable housing plan review of draft.
So this is just, again, picking up where we left off many months ago. But what I can do, I mean, we were given it, you were originally given it back, I think, more COVID era. So I'm happy to print out a hard copy of the draft for you
I'd
to
like to have
review.
that, yes.
And then I keep saying when the agenda's quiet down and we have more time, but we can take it up, but I'll print out hard copies so you guys can take a review, mark it up, and we can talk about it.
Well, we need to get it done eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote to the state and so
Okay.
we have some coverage, but yes, we do need that.
All right, item G, approval of minutes, September 20th.
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
I'll
And
second.
I would note that your name was spelled correctly this time.
I listened, I didn't say.
No, your name was
Thank
spelled
you.
correctly in the minutes this time.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I checked and made sure.
Okay.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
Aye.
Bob.
Discussion. You've been in discussions, right?
Not
I
Go on,
just-
Bob, you can do it.
Just in the minutes that it says that when I spoke about the water, I was talking about a different water source, not a water course.
Okay.
As it's recorded. That's the only thing I.
Sure. I'll note that.
Okay, thank you. Other than that, I'm good.
All right, all in favor? I provided, that's.
Aye.
right. Yeah. All right, item H, public participation for items not on the agenda.
Real quick, because it's not technically on the agenda, you guys are considering a moratorium on the SDZ, are you also considering a moratorium on warehouse use until they can be defined and integrated and limited and stuff?
We just talked about is SDZ.
Nick Dell, 49 Merle. Just read off, because the FOIA request had to do with this board, just want to update the board. So I wanted to update the board in regards to the FOIA request I had submitted to the Land Use Department and Board of Selectmen in regards to the warehouse project that was proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 9th. I had submitted a FOIA request. Since the July 20th request was purposely ignored by according to Mike. During my meeting with Mike, Erica, and the town lawyer on September 26th, Mike had stated he ignored the first FOIA request due to him not being comfortable with the criticism of him on Facebook. Erica and the town lawyer had stated the FOIA request had been filled. That is factually not true. I was given the majority of the request, which had 6 bullet points, pretty much all had to do with planning and zoning issues. But I was not given emails that had been used in an official manner to conduct business between the developers and associated parties relating to the development. The exact request for this bullet point was, quote, to have all emails, personal and government accounts from Erica, Mike, and John Kozowski that have been used in an official manner to conduct business between the developers and associated parties relating to the development of the 1.5 million square foot project referencing PZ Tag 22 Tag 10, end quote. Again, in that email, I clearly stated all emails from Erica, Mike, and John. It clearly states, quote, that have been used in an official manner to conduct business between the developers and associated parties, which is relating to the warehouse project. The only email I was given was an email between, I believe it was Mike and either Erica or John. I then asked if there were any emails between the town and the developers. And with an ignorant attitude from the town lawyer, had stated the request had been filled, which then led to a back and forth with me saying how it wasn't and them saying it was. I then asked, well, have there been any emails between the town and the developers? And I was quickly told by Erica and the town lawyer to FOIA that request, which I had already done and they ignored it. I personally feel that there was no shady behavior, but I do have reason to doubt the way the SDZ went down, combined with the language in the contract that Type A has with the EDC, gives some reason to question things. Another member in town the other day I had seen in either minutes or video where Mike had stated to a board that there was some communications with a developer, which could have been in reference to Hillside, but I don't know. But if that resident that had spoke up, if they want to speak in regards to what they heard, maybe Mike can speak on that situation. In closing, the FOIA department has accepted my complaint and just waiting a docket number. And that's all I have for now.
Good, thanks. Any further? Okay. Correspondence, item I. Anything, Mike? Staff report discussion, item 1, 331 River Road.
So I just wanted to give you guys an update. It's been obviously a long time. I think I mentioned last time that, or when we last had an update, that our motion for contempt had been granted, was served on the property owner. You probably have noticed things being improving slightly over there. And that's basically because the former owner is the potential future redeemer of the property when it goes to foreclosure auction at the end of October. So he has essentially just been going over there and cleaning it up to try to rectify the compliance issues so that if he redeems the property, he's not the now owner of a court action between the town. If the property is, when the property is redeemed, it's because the owner changes, it likely essentially throws our entire enforcement case out the window because it's a totally different owner. And that's not something that tracks through foreclosure. But based upon where things stand now, the real only outstanding issue is the vehicles that are there. Everything else is more or less been cleaned up. And it seems like the property owner that used to own the property in May down the road is going to bring it into compliance either way. So there should be a resolution there, even though it's been monumentally.
So the other guy just abandoned like that RV, all the other stuff there?
I don't know if I'd say abandoned, because last I heard he's still on the property.
Okay.
But has basically walked away since the foreclosure started.
Okay. Well, at least something's happening.
Yeah.
Long road, huh?
It, yeah, really was that the changes related to military affidavits and because of COVID and what we had to file is, I mean, that took us 6 months, that one document, that was really slowed it down. The other item there was the zoning reg update. And we talked a lot about things within the regulations, inconsistencies in the regulations. We know that our sign regs are not content neutral. There are issues with multiple types of uses which require annual renewals. For example, home occupations. You can't require a home any special permits to come in for renewals. It's not legal per statute. So I think the list of things that needs to be changed has gotten to the point where I think it's substantial enough that it may warrant us sort of starting with Article 1 and going through to the last page and revising the regs little by little. It's going to take a long time, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to do. So I just wanted to sort of put that on your radar.
So you're saying we can't have annually renewable special permits?
No.
Doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
They basically run with the land, and you probably would be hard pressed to even try to, unless there was a significant change in circumstance or in the operation.
So in other words, a quarry would no longer.
Quarries are different, and
Okay.
there's some stuff in the statutes which allow for it, but all these other home occupations and some of this other stuff, the way that the regulations are written. And the intent behind that is all of our permits are approved by special permit. Dollar General is probably the most recent, or Love's. I mean, Love's, I think the building permit construction cost was just under $20 million. That was a special permit. We can't give them something and say, well, by the way, come back in a year and we'll evaluate whether we want you to continue after you've just spent $50 million on a site. And so there was a lot of clarifying case law within the last year that basically said, yeah, affirmatively, you cannot do this. So there's some strategy to reducing approval hurdles as far as going from special permit to site plan, because site plans expire. So you have a lot more leverage because they can't say, well, this runs with the land forever. It's a special permit. I've had it for 15 years. Site plans are good for a max of 5. So something that we need to look at, because a lot of our approvals are based on special permits and this idea of renewals and re-review, which we can't do.
Why did we think we could? Did we used to be able to, statutes changed, or?
No, it's just basically as things go on and everybody is more worried about lawsuit and more happy to sue, we get more clarifying case law year after year after year.
Okay,
And
that's
the issue of time limits. So basically they have to track with the site plan criteria. So that's.
So the only time that a special permit would expire is on a transfer of the land.
It wouldn't expire even then.
Really?
Transfer of use, I guess, but change of use with them.
Right, if it's willfully terminated or a new use is you go from one type to another, or they. And so a lot of the regulations you'll see, if you do this or that, or if you fail to maintain something else, that it is going to be considered a willful termination of the use. And even that is shaky, but it's probably the best you have at trying to claw back something that was approved. So we probably got to endeavor to get that stuff done and try to address some of those.
All right, that brings us to item K. It's 11:02 PM, meeting adjourned.